Lieutenant Gonzalez, just kind of like there.
Yeah,
So
Everybody
basically,
has-
for one person, they got multiple,
like 4 or 5. Yeah.
but you don't really know how they're going to turn out.
Okay.
Always a risk.
Sorry, right?
Good morning, everyone.
Just
It
trying to-
is just after 9 o'clock. We are here at August 8th, 2023 for our 9 o'clock board briefing meeting. Let the record reflect that all 5 commissioners are present and our executive management team. And we will go ahead and kick off with Tori Peterson. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, thank you. Good morning. I'm here to brief you on our evidence-based expansion grant. They are pass-through funds that support our evidence-based programs. They come to the state through DCYF, specifically JR, and they fund our functional family therapy program, coordination of services program, and our education and employment program. That covers staff, quality assurance, foods, incentives, rewards that are built into the quality assurance and model fidelity of these programs. Contracts also, we contract out for the functional family therapy. And that's it. Any questions on that?
So how much was the grant? I apologize.
322,000 and 250.
Is it mostly contracted out? Is that what you were saying?
No, we
Or do
support
you
some staff,
some staff?
including support staff, because some of our staff run the programs. The only
Okay.
program that's fully contracted out is functional family
Oh,
therapy.
and who
except
does
for
that
some-
with the county? Is that?
Teddy Green has been a long time. We are fortunate enough to have the best functional family therapy provider in the state. With our evidence-based programs, there's a lot of quality assurance that goes into the model fidelity, and FFT Inc. oversees that, and they're graded and evaluated, and we always come out on top. We're lucky to have a great private contractor.
More questions for Tori? No? Excited. Thank you.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
You guys
thank
have a good
you.
day.
Okay, that's gonna then take us next to our other sheriff.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm here to brief you on the new contract with Medical Lake for police services. As you know, we've contracted since the dissolution of their police department several years ago. And what we did was we looked at, it started with Deer Park. And actually, this is kind of a mirror image of the Deer Park contract as far as the cost analysis. One of the things we did was look at how we build Medical Lake. And it was a very complicated process. I think the budget office can agree to that. It was mired in statistics and a lot of work on everybody's end. We thought, what is the true cost to place a deputy full-time per FTE in Medical Lake? Budget office came up, and coincidentally, it was a pretty round number, 300,000 per FTE. We approached Medical Lake with that, and the model's going to change such that they will have 2 full-time deputies assigned to Medical Lake on day shift. And then in the evenings, we will still cover we will cover 24 hours to all calls in Medical Lake. They just won't be staffed with a full-time person. And that was agreeable to them. Looking at the call data they had, it was far more economical for them. It makes our staffing, providing on the West Plains a little bit better, a little more responsive to the needs on the West Plains. And so we fully encourage this contract. All parties were very amenable to it. It solved a lot of things for both sides. So I think that's what it is. It's set up to start retroactively August 1st, and we will go through December 31st of next year with an automatic 5-year renewal unless a party decides otherwise. So.
Just want to thank you for working with them. I know that there is a lot of history and frustration, and certainly appreciate you finding a path forward that meets our needs in there. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was a good exercise, and I think we all came out better for it. So
Good.
yeah, thank you. Excellent. Yes, ma'am.
So is there something that makes it unique, the total cost per deputy for Medical Lake compared to other communities?
So The only other community, so aside from the Valley, which
Right.
due to the size and scope of that contract,
It's
is
kind
very
of a-
different. Right.
Yeah, you can't really compare.
Right,
apples to
so
oranges.
we basically have the small city contract with Deer Park and Medical Lake now mirror each other in
Okay.
cost per deputy.
Okay.
The only other contracts we have for police services that are different would be the smaller cities such as Millwood, Latah, Rockford, Fairfield, et cetera. Those are set to where we don't have someone sign there full time, however, we do respond as necessary, and we strongly encourage our deputies that work in those areas to go through those towns as often as possible. Attend their city council meetings, deal with them on the weekly basis, so there's basically 3 different types of contracts. Valley is its own, Deer Park, Medical Lake are very similar, and then the small cities.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Looks like no more questions on
Okay.
that one.
All right. The next one is regarding, this is Lieutenant Elliott handles the Regional Intelligence Group. This is a contract that we've had with the county school districts for some time regarding access to their school cameras in an emergency situation. We've had those contracts for years. Several of them were out of date and the language needed to be updated. Our staff worked with legal and with the school districts to find updated language. That's pretty much what this is. We wanted a single contract that would work for all the districts rather than rewriting it each time or whatever. It's the contract's attached in here. It's really well written and simpler to understand now, and it's consistent. So
And you had this in the past, it's just.
yes, this is nothing. This is not a new program or anything. We've had this as long as we've been able to access those cameras with the technology, and now with the Real-Time Crime Center, hopefully it never happens where we have to access it, but in the event it did, it would give us an ability to provide intelligence to the patrol deputies and tactical units much quicker and much safer.
Does this also give you, or maybe you already have, and I'm just not aware of it, the opportunity to access those cameras from a remote site, so that if you had a station set up, command station set up adjacent to the school, you could see what's going on
Yes.
without having to go through? Okay, great.
Yeah, and so in fact, we actually ran through that exercise in Meade High School last year when we ran an active shooter drill. We were accessing it from there. The Real-Time Crime Center and the RIG in the Sheriff's Office has access to these now and can pull them up in an emergency situation. There's also language in here that we notify the school if we accessed it. In the middle of an event is not where you're gonna be making phone calls like, hey, is it okay? Things are happening.
Right.
However, there is that after the fact notification so that they're aware that we did access it.
Great, thank you.
Does this language kind of mirror like the university contract with like Whitworth?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. I think I may have drafted those original ones, and so this is probably just an updated version of those that were drafted a few years ago.
Any other questions? Next one.
Oh, the next one is I'm gonna pass the baton to Lieutenant Keene to discuss the crime line.
Yeah, so I'm here just to make a request to reallocate monies that were granted to us for the 2023 budget. Originally, they were for a crime light and a recovery system, which totaled $127,718. And in going through priorities for the forensic unit, we have the forensic firearms specialist in-house now, but we need to have microscopes for him to attend the training to try to further that program and to try to alleviate some of the backlog that the state patrol is running into just because the amount of work that they have. We had the ability to get a discounted set of scopes from Leeds, which is one of the main manufacturers, that came in at $128,246. So basically, we're just taking two items and reallocating those funds. We'll reapply for one of those items in the 24 budget, but the microscopes will meet more of an emergent need right now, so.
So on a budget item like that, I'm just gonna ask the question, do they need to come to us if it's within their budget?
So this one, if I recall correctly, it was, you have items on your 6-year CIP that you were buying in 2023, planning on it. The board had approved those items. So because they're wanting to change a couple of the items and purchase this, we wanted to make sure the board has visibility into that to give the go-ahead on swapping that out.
Okay. So
They were named items in the CIP.
And I do, if anybody's interested, I do have kind of just a little background of what we're doing and what the reasoning behind it.
Okay, I just want to just clarify on the budget side, but I think you guys
I don't
know
know.
your needs better than we do, so.
Really, it comes down to being able to, this program, when we submitted our 23 budget, we weren't necessarily aware of the capabilities of the ATM program and this ballistics expert. And shortly after the year started, we were able to find out about this. And so this allows us to process that evidence much quicker than waiting in line at the State Patrol Crime Lab. Additionally, this is something that, given the split of the forensics unit with SPD, is really, it's a 60-40 split. So with share and settle and adjust with the cities, it's a significantly lower than that actual cost.
Just to clarify the budget piece, so the 128,264, that's not in addition, it's replacing a previous number that was really similar, right? Okay, correct. And then when it says to be spent out of the forensics general fund, what does that mean from the briefing paper?
Well, my understanding is that the 127,000 was originally, I think they had it under our persons fund, but it was for the forensics unit. So those two items, the cost of those two items is basically equivalent to the two scopes. So the only part that would come out of their, I guess, general fund would be about that $1,000 of difference.
Randy can correct me if I'm wrong, but Commissioner, I believe under the Sheriff's Department, there's multiple types of programs, if you will. Forensics is one of them. It's in the general fund under the Sheriff's Department, so I think that's what the reference
Within
was.
the sheriff's office?
Yeah.
Okay, good, thank you. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
George, nice to see you again.
I'm back.
Yeah, you're back on board.
Yeah. You should probably Mariners cap or something.
Absolutely, second that.
So I'm here today to brief you all on a contract that we have with the Washington State Department of Commerce. This is a contract for the Consolidated Homeless Grant. This is a contract that we've received over the years through Commerce. And this is really to provide direct client services to individuals experiencing homelessness. The thing that's unique about this one is it's a significant increase over what we've received historically. So the contract amount, and this is a biennium as part of the state's budget, so 2 years. The contract amount before you is $8,699,126. And this is to be able to provide admin support for both the county as well as our partner agencies. It's also to provide eviction prevention and then some other additional salary priorities that Washington State Department of Commerce has placed on some of their social service programs. So we've already allocated the majority of these funds. We need to do some additional allocations because our total grant award came in much higher than we were originally given by the Department of Commerce, almost $1.4 million higher than our original estimate from them. So we'll do some additional requests for proposals here once we get our new homeless programs manager on board to take the lead on that. But anyways, you all have approved, I think it was back at your May 9th consent agenda, you approved multiple recommendations that came through the Housing and Community Development Advisory Committee, and this is just effectively the lump sum grant to be able to support that.
Okay, so I'm just gonna clarify, I apologize. So they've given additional funds,
Correct.
so it's a 2-year grant. So how much additional, how much was original?
Originally, it was around $7.3 million. That was what we did our RFP, our request for proposal for, was around $7.3 million. So that's where we've got that additional funding that we need to do some additional allocations on.
Okay, and how much was the additional? I'm sorry, so it was 7.3 to start.
Yeah, 7.3 to start, and then this current contract before you is $8,699,126.
So about an additional 1.3 is what you said. Okay.
Over 2 years.
Okay, so then these would be grants as we put these out there, that as we do them, as we look to the homeless authority, this would be part of those funds that would be looked at as part of that.
Absolutely, yeah. This would fall within the portfolio of funds specifically designated for homeless services.
Okay, and then will the 1.3 go through the committee to come back to us
Yeah.
for recommendations? Okay. Just clarifying all that, thank you.
It deserves clarity.
Well, so to piggyback on, so the 1.3 is gonna go back through the committee, or were there some awardees, as I look at the spreadsheet in the packet here, did some of these organizations ask for more than they received? So are you gonna up their dollar amounts to the amounts they asked for, or go back out, ask for new applicants and award grantees that didn't receive any dollars, I guess?
Yeah, so we've got a little bit to work through on that, because we did, the proposal that we put before Commerce was to those agencies or applications that didn't get funded in full. We proposed through that application process that we fund them in full if we have those additional funds. I think that once we get our new homeless program manager on, I want to really take a close look at our overall portfolio and make sure that our allocations make the greatest sense based off of the gaps or needs that we see out there. But additionally, that overage or extra funding that we've received will go out for a request for proposal to have additional agencies be able to apply for those funds.
Okay.
Do we know, can you remind me how the Commerce determines how much goes to each county and kind of why we were under and what we expected?
I can't answer that question. I'm not sure exactly how Commerce goes about their allocation methodology as it relates to this particular grant program. I do know that it's a portion of document recording fees. So throughout the state, there's a portion that goes back to the Department of Commerce that actually funds the Consolidated Homeless Grant Program. So my suspicion is that Commerce over the last couple of years saw something similar to what we saw locally with an excess of document recording fees. And so as a result, I think they're trying to activate those funds and also provide a bit of a buffer for the communities as we come off kind of the COVID funding high, if you will. So trying to soften that.
So, and we apply for it every year. Is
We
that right?
apply
Or
for
every
it,
2
but
years?
it's a set amount that Commerce provides to us. So and this is where the budget gets a little challenging. I'm sure you all see this with other states when they're setting their budget. They go into session with an idea of what they intend to do, and then after the session's over, what they started with and what they end with could vary plus or minus. And I think that's what we're seeing here is a plus after session.
Do you think that, so were you just made aware in the last like month that the grant was higher than what expected? So do you think the city of Spokane also would have gotten a larger number?
I would suspect that they are as well, but I'm not sure.
Any other questions for George?
And the request would be that we sign and enter into contract with Commerce for this.
Okay, do we need to do it through resolution?
It's on this afternoon.
It's on the second. Yep. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
It's gonna take us to Justin.
Oh,
So just have you sit
More
at-
money than you
Yeah.
expected.
Good job, George.
Keep up the good work, George.
Just like that.
See you tomorrow, George.
Yeah.
Morning, Commissioners.
I'm Jeremy.
I think we have a PowerPoint and some handouts. As I'll be giving updates on 3 areas today. I don't know what the PowerPoint is. Excellent.
Got sent to me.
Awesome. So we'll be giving updates on 3 items. Our SEBRA amendment, which is a cleanup from our July 1 contract period, and then 2 updates on programs. One of which was a request to hear more about our response to the True Blood contempt, what is potentially impacting Spokane. So we'll start with the cleanup item. Next slide. Back in the transition from me taking over as director and the transition of our former director, we presented to the board the SEBRA contract for our CARES division, which is the Department of Commerce grant. What was missed in that initial one was the MOU with our CARES division. So with the contract approved by the board, we received the funds from the Department of Commerce. We actually passed those funds from the ASO division into our CARES and provide the funds. Funds were provided in along with the requirements of the program and in alignment with the Department of Commerce grant. So none of that was an issue. However, we do need to have an outstanding MOU so that we can have administrative and legal protection for that transfer of funds between the two. So we're just asking for the board to approve the MOU for the funds that they've already approved that have been utilized for that purpose. That would essentially just cover our CARES division for the transfer of those. Next slide. So that's our request. Essentially approve that. This is just follow-up information for the amount of funds that were dispersed as part of the Department of Commerce grants. We already provided this information, but it's good background for why we needed that MOU. Next slide. And of course, that's our ask. And again, that covers from the July 1 to the June 30th period. Next slide. Any questions on?
Any questions for Justin? Not seeing any, so good to go.
The next one is our update on the Initiative for Student Wellness, our school-based screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment. This is an amazing program that we piloted in our Spokane region. This is one of a kind in the state, and actually we won the NACO award for this as well for achievement and being able to highlight some of the amazing programming they're doing in Spokane County. So I wanted to give an update at the end of the school year, which has just occurred, on how did it go? Did we achieve the goals that we set out to achieve? And how was it received by the community? So the great news, just off the top, is it went very well and the community loves it. And that's part of the problem. It went quicker than we anticipated in terms of the desire to want to push this. So in September, as we did, the board approving this and putting this into place, we initiated in West Valley School District. We had 2 clinicians in the middle school and high school, and a screening was implemented by our team, which is a 21 questionnaire, essentially achieving some really key points along the students' wellness. How are they doing academically? Are they bullying, drugs and alcohol, but in a minimal sense? We don't go into specifics like what the drug alcohol is, just is there any involvement? Suicidal ideation, and do they want to seek help? And those would trigger certain triage, and then we immediately follow up and provide services. And this is modeled after a similar program in King County, like I've shared before, but we do the follow-up where they don't. And one of the highlights we also learned this year was the Children's Alliance and the state's Children's Board recommended this program that King County does and the follow-up as one of their primary methods of engagement now that we're having this children's mental health crisis. So right at the time that they recommended this, we're implementing it and had success. So that was really exciting to hear. It was a little rocky start when we started in October because it was brand new, and we actually lost a clinician because someone stole them in this workforce environment because they really liked the program. And then I'll give you another update. We lost the other two because other people stole them again because they're so great. So we're rebounding on that. But we overall, next slide, saw.
Justin?
Yeah.
Just a question, was it like other school districts or other school settings?
Well, we're still
Just one.
waiting to hear that out there. So it sounds like another school district and then the hospitals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in their brand new children's programs. So again, we train them well. Out of the total number of schools, here are the risk areas that we identified in terms of what was identified. As you can see in some of the handouts that we provided, almost 50% of all students who took the survey, which is over almost 300 students, 50% reported having significant and or challenges with behavioral health or some functioning. And then we're tiered into the tier 3 or 2, which are the highest risk categories. And of those, at least half of those reported of that tier group. So I believe out of 300, about 50 of those students reported having suicidal ideation or attempts at self-harm within the last year. So this is an area the school said that it wasn't an issue. And then when we did the survey, again, voluntary survey, the students provided this. It was something the school had mentioned to us they did not know existed. And again, since we trigger all students in the survey, it means that across socioeconomic statuses and all demographics, we were able to achieve clear examples and results of things that were not previously known. So that part was exciting in one sense, not exciting to know about the challenges, but exciting to know that we were able to do outreach and engagement with these students.
Quick question. Can you remind me who gets screened?
All students within a specific target class. So for the high school, it was all 10th graders. And so part of the process is opt-in. All parents must approve and be okay with their student receiving it as part of the federal statute on that. Once that is done, then every student, because it's a 21-minute survey, gets 15 minutes in their class time to complete the survey with the clinician. And the students can opt out. And our opt-out rate for the students was like 5%. So most of them agreed to do it. And then out of those numbers is who we represented. So again, all 10th graders was the goal, and then all 7th graders. There was some challenges with the 7th graders because some fall below the 13-year-olds, which under state law requires that the parents also sign off on any treatment and care being provided. 13 and over, of course, have sole discretion on their treatment and care, which again, we ensured was the case. All parents were involved throughout the process. So yeah, out of the 300 students, the data not only reflects what we're seeing in national trends, but again, provides another avenue of engagement in the schools that were not previously known. As you can see also in this, there's a lot of data in this. A lot have experienced bullying, engagement with drug and alcohol, primarily in the high schools, but surprisingly a lot in our middle schools. And then also anxiety was reported to be, in isolation, to be significantly higher than we anticipated. 33% of those had reported in the entire survey that they were experiencing anxiety and isolation. Again, mirroring national trends, but now we actually have data in the school that demonstrates that. And the handout I'm going through is provided as a supplementary, so you'll get those. And then we also have a 15-page final report for you to read, when you're at home and need something. Overall, the feedback was overwhelming. A lot of that was finally someone cares about what we're doing. So we actually in the report demonstrate some of the responses by students and parents. This has been an issue that no one's addressed, and we're just thankful that someone's stepping in to do it. And then other feedback is, we didn't realize the problem was this bad, and we want more of this. So the dean that actually of the school that we helped do this in West Valley got promoted and is a principal of another school district, trying to convince us to carry the program with him into the East Valley School District, which is challenging because we have, very targeted funds specific for this program. So overwhelming success in terms of the being reciprocated by the community, in terms of how they received services. The students got engaged, and the school wants more of their more of their staff trained to be able to provide the service. And as we said, all of the students that we had targeted in those grades got screened and got follow-up and referred. Some of the areas I haven't covered are like resources that weren't identified to behavioral health, because this hits all areas of social determinants of health. So we referred them into academic engagement, like Launch Northwest, food scarcity, so their families were referred to food support services, and then any other resource community where advocacy or other organization needed help, they were referred. So it was a resounding success. In fact, we got so many requests that we actually targeted new schools, and we had more requests than we had availability of both the funds and the staff. So moving forward, next slide, we'll be targeting 3 new school districts, Cheney, Riverside, and Freeman. And they have heard the success from the superintendents, not from the behavioral providers, just from superintendents. And they are all on board with our program. In fact, they want more clinicians. Next slide.
So, so the parents have to sign off for the student to take the survey. Is the survey a paper-based survey? Is it on computers? I mean,
Yeah, it's a digital survey.
okay. So once they take the survey and they're placed into a tier 1, 2, or 3, based on their answers, then then you mentioned something about 7th grade, the 13-year-olds versus the 10th grade.
Yeah.
So is it then it's up to the student on whether they receive the services, or are the parents disconnected from the process at that point? Is that how I understood that?
So it depends on the student and the need that exists. So from the moment the parent opts in, they're notified as part of the process of the school that that's going to occur and when it's going to occur, and to talk with their student when they return home with it. So if they decide to opt in, they're notified of that day. For the middle school, we had this issue where under 13, right, parents still has sole discretion on treatment. They're immediately followed up and the parent signs off and is a part of that treatment process. So for those, it's ongoing. And remember, the treatment isn't an enrolled intake. So when they do the screen, the student's name is actually not entered into the screen. It's de-identified. So there's no way for us to track it unless the school actually or the parents approve, but we don't as a process track that. The only time that the student's name is entered is if the clinician it triggers the tier and they follow up. So it's school staff who actually meet with the student and the student says, I want help. Then that triggers the follow for the behavioral health service if necessary. Otherwise, we may not know about the resource and we never receive the name, and only the parents do.
Okay.
So for the high school, it's a little bit different. If they're over 13 and they do want services, technically by law, they can involve their parents or not. But again, the school, we're working with school personnel, and so the parents can contact the school and ask what follow-up is being provided. And they can't say what treatment service is without having a release of information. The school has that available and provided for the behavioral health component only. But they're provided all information regarding other resources that have been provided to the student.
Okay. Those behavioral health services, is this program set up to where those services are provided in the schools as well?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, alongside school staff. And so again, they're part of the process. Parents want to be involved, they can contact the school. It is never outside of the school.
Gotcha.
And it's not ever not in alignment with staff personnel.
Okay.
Which is why it's so successful, because the schools realize now that we're involving them in the process and it's integrated care.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I have to say, talking to Justin and Dr. Crump from School District 81, who's the psychologist overseeing the therapists, are actually through kind of, I don't know, it's convoluted, but through there. But this is actually paid for out of our 1/10 mental health dollars. So I mean, that's part of why I keep saying there's programs that we're already doing with those dollars that we don't, that we don't have enough funding to even expand to the entire, community. So it's kind of one of those, but this is like one of those key preventative measures that we can do. And students can be seen at the schools up to, 10, 12 times, by these therapists. And so it's, there's a lot of surveys that go on that are being done, but there's no follow-up. And so it's basically telling the kids, yeah, give us the information, but if you think you're suicidal, okay, we're gonna take that data and 2 years from now, maybe look at doing something with the data. Instead of, we're following up that day, saying we care, we wanna make sure you're healthy. And part of, I'm on the youth mental health committee for Launch Northwest, and so we've been talking about this a lot. And looking at even how can we, with the wellness side of it, because it's not just mental health, it's, what other insecurities are they having or issues? Could we partner with like a communities and schools? They're gonna be at Cheney, and so is that a way to partner with, other groups then to also help? So, it's pretty exciting what this program is doing and doing different than anyone else across the country. Nobody else is following up that day. So those kids have the opportunity to know that someone cares. The other thing that's been interesting talking with Justin and Dr. Crump is that, students are because they do one classroom at a time, and so you can't do the entire sophomore class in one day. Is kids are doing this and seeing the help that's happening and telling other kids, oh, you need to make sure you do this. So it's taking the stigma away, I think, and helping, and then it's not, as Justin says, they're not getting an intake, so they're, so it's on their record forever. So this is something that they're just getting help, when they need it, as they need it. And counselors are saying, kids that they thought, would score in the third tier, weren't, and some that they thought, would be at the first tier are in the third tier. So you're catching those kids that you never would know, that silent thing that, a lot of the suicides we know are kids like, how did that happen? Everybody thought he was great or she was great, so, this really is, I see it as pretty groundbreaking and really, hitting youth mental health, where we can, because you can talk about it all you want, but what's actually gonna make a difference and make a change, and this is one of the few programs that I see that could do that. So, thank you, Dustin.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting too that Dr. Crump is kind of overseen from a medical perspective, right? The other, is he kind of in a leadership role over the clinicians technically?
So he's over the agency that we're contracting, Spokane Public Schools is one of the entities.
Right. Okay.
So he oversees it.
But it's interesting because I think this model, I would love to chat with Dr. Crump because I've worked with him on all sorts of other initiatives in the zone project previous, and because SPS's model, is very different. They only provide to Medicaid eligible students, while this is really blind to what the students, family's economic situation is. So you're just looking at anybody's mental health and then targeting the intervention. Right. And so I would love to chat more with Dr. Crump because I think they're, while SPS model was groundbreaking in its time, right? To provide school-based mental health services like 15, 20 years ago. Thing is, they're missing, I think, a lot of students by not being able to, and the Healthy Youth Survey, as you're pointing out, is just a huge survey. Yeah. But it tells you, oh my gosh, our youth are really struggling. But then how do you intervene? Right. Do you compare the data did you use some of the Healthy Youth Survey questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
but you're able to then target the intervention to a student rather than it just being generic information that we know about countywide or school-wide.
Correct, because the Healthy Youth Survey is 250 questions. Right. It takes over an hour to complete. There's no way, and especially in the high school, that there's a completion rate that would meet or match the numbers, but it's on par. So our data shows
similar questions.
Not only does our data show almost exactly in alignment,
oh good, okay.
Which is, again, speaks to the fidelity of what we're doing in terms of the questions, but also we're hitting a wider swath of people. Our completion rates are much higher.
This is a great program. Exciting.
It's one of the ones that was targeted in the Surgeon General's request that needs to occur nationwide. So it's really great too.
Commissioner Jordan.
How's it going with stabilizing staff?
Yeah, well, as I
Dare I
mentioned,
ask?
yes, I just mentioned, so we spend a lot of time training our clinicians so that they can work with the schools and integrate with the schools. And that's is actually through EST 101 and Spokane Public Schools. Our commitment is to ensure the service provided in the community that meets the need of the community. So we find clinicians who are from that community, that part's hard, right? We want people who are in Riverside to be from Riverside, understand Riverside and Freeman and so forth. And what we find is that once we train them, and that takes almost 3 to 4 months on top of that, then people love that and steal them, and they're really great and engaging. And we can't compete. It's almost $110,000 for a clinician to leave for the hospital, and we can't pay that in our program. And so that part's been hard. I will tell you the commitment that's kept them there is their desire to want to serve the students.
Are they employed by the school or by the county, the clinicians?
They're employed by the entity that we contract with, so either public schools or EST 101.
Do they do like an exit interview, or did they give feedback on?
We're working on that right now.
Okay.
They're gonna do it with us. They didn't necessarily want, in fact, it was kind of awkward in how they sent the notice to us. So we're gonna do an exit interview and kind of just get a sense. They essentially just said it's because they're getting a better compensation. It's what we've heard. And it is wildly, much better pay than what we get. But we are pulling, so here's the challenge too, is to Commissioner Waldie, for your statement about Spokane Public Schools clinicians, they're actually transitioning from that side to go to our program because they believe so much into it. So they're actually potentially have challenges in losing clinicians, the outpatient. So it's a give and take at times.
Yeah, and we've got other nonprofits that are losing clinicians to the program as well, because I know there's another nonprofit that was just telling me that they lost a clinician to this program. I mean, because it's, people see it as a really beneficial and really helping, so.
Just one clarification, so the funding through the mental health sales tax, it supports the staff, right? And if they screen into needing treatment, they can get that from that same staff person right in the school, regardless of insurance and
Ability to
ability
pay,
to pay.
background, history, and something that's not widely known too is their immigration status. Oftentimes, we don't recognize that fact that students receive compulsory education that can also be a non-resident in the United States. We don't ask those questions. We just say, if you need help, you receive help. And as you can see in our demographics, the numbers of students and the specific groups that we're receiving shows much more diverse groups of individuals than we see on the adult side. And that's just in one school, so.
Follow-up question on what Commissioner Jordan just asked. Can you remind the commissioners, Justin, about how much funds from mental health was invested in the SBIRT program this last year?
Mm-hmm.
And then how are you envisioning that to change with the expansion to 3 additional schools this year?
Yes, so we initially received a request from the commissioners and approved for over $400,000, roughly about $498,000. And then when we asked for the increase, it essentially doubled that. So we're close to this year, once we complete the 12-month cycle, 1.2 million will be utilized for the purpose of this program. And the allocation is coming from the mental health sales tax and part of what we've been utilizing in our reserve for the department. And so it's kind of a combination of both of those.
Helpful in the sense of to Commissioner Cuny's point, how those mental health sales tax dollars are being spent, invested, and committed to a variety of purposes, this one with our youth and helping to be preventative at the front end.
And Commissioner Cuny, like you make a good point, like the Cheney School District, Communities and Schools is really active there. And those are full-time site coordinators that work in a school, and they provide one-on-one support for students, wraparound services like a food bank in the school and other things like that. So like this is a great combination, because as you're screening students like in Cheney, and some students that may not have been screened by other means in the school that might need some of those clothing and other, basic necessities and some one-on-one support academically with after-school programs and such. Like Cheney has this community schools model embedded. Some of the other districts do. I mean, Spokane, that's what we worked on expanding all throughout Northeast Spokane. Because sometimes you can find that the student has these other needs, but there's maybe not a program in the school for connecting them to those resources effectively.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've already met with them and are partnering so that our services are integrated and not duplicative.
Right.
We want to see them as
Right.
partners. So yeah, they're very exciting. What they're doing is amazing work. And the same with Launch Northwest. So our goal is again to integrate in with the schools and support them, really.
How does the program determine which school districts are selected for next expansion? And then what does the conversation look like with those districts that you're hoping to expand to?
Yeah, so a great question. It was primarily due to size. We wanted to start pilots in a certain amount of students overall because it was one clinician for 2,000 students. It's just not feasible, right? And we wanted to make sure that they were able to have a caseload. So we tried to target school districts or the specific school to be under about 1,200 students. And so we kind of looked at those avenues. And then for the Cheney School District, we had slightly more. We also looked at need. So not only was existing resources identified, which services have clinicians already there. So we tried to find schools that didn't. And so they were more resource limited. And then we also tried to find those that had a size that would be manageable, because we can only afford to. Cheney was our biggest expansion, was the next step up. And so really now we're at funds and workforce. So we would explore the possibility after this first year of bigger schools at the board's discretion, but really we want to make this work and make sure that we're not biting off more than we can chew. So primarily it was due to size and resource availability for those schools, which primarily hit our outer parts of our county for those schools, Freeman and Riverside and Cheney. Other schools were targeted as the need definitely was there, but the volume of students and the amount of caseload would be overwhelming to the existing. One person that would not be enough. We didn't want to start something we couldn't finish, essentially.
Thank you.
Yes. And then,
We have more to talk about though too, right?
yes, I have one last briefing. And again, if there's any questions when you guys read the report, please let me know.
Is the report, was that already emailed separately?
Yeah, it was all these additions should have been provided.
Oh,
There are a lot of pages, so we want to make sure you had that available.
thanks.
I believe at one of your,
I don't know if it's in the packet, but.
yes, we'll make sure you get it if it wasn't, but it should have. We tried to upload in Civic Clerk, but Civic Clerk was giving some bounce back because our documents were so large. So we'll make sure that the commissioners and everyone receives it. At our, I believe at one of your last meetings, the topic of the True Blood contempt that Judge Peckman just recently issued, well, in June, came up. And so we wanted to give some background, not on the specifics of the legal side, I'll refer to Chris on that one, but essentially what are the behavioral health impacts and what are we potentially going to see not only in our jail, but in our community based on the information that we've been provided. So as a primer, most people are aware of this. True Blood stemmed from a class action lawsuit against the state back in 2015 regarding a number of individuals who were waiting to receive competency restoration proceedings and then were not receiving those in a timely manner. And so the state found that to be constitutionally wrong. So they were, 2015 had the order against them, and then 2018 had the settlement agreement. Since that time, there was a secondary contempt, and this is really essentially the third contempt order from that original order in 2015, and then the settlement agreement in 2018. The state did a wonderful job from 2018 to address a lot of the issues around timeliness in the response. But since that time, both individuals waiting for competency restoration as well as individuals receiving that treatment has increased drastically. And I believe they're currently at, numbers were correctly, because Judge Beckman's order did identify this specifically, inpatient competency evaluations, their rate of compliance was at 17%, and then restoration services, wait times were at an 8% compliance with the original order. So primarily in Western State Hospital, but this does impact Eastern State Hospital. And so there was some part of the order concern. So that's the background. Of course, there's a lot deeper issues on that I won't go into. This is your expert here. However, what does this mean for us? Like, what is the actual impact that we see from Eastern State Hospital? Part of the order that Peckman's order indicates that they has to be released within 60 days. All civil patients receiving treatment, that is both the conversions from the forensic side as well as the standing civil patients placed from the community. As part of that order, all civil placements at Eastern have been halted. So currently, no placements are allowed since June to be placed there. That puts a bottleneck in our community. Also, at the same time, there's a limitation on the court's issuing of forensic conversion flips to Eastern as they are working to release them. And so there's, again, another bottleneck on how individuals access the services. So after our last engagement with Eastern, we did ask for a total number. There are, if we look at just civil patients, including conversions, 132 awaiting discharge if the order goes through. As it stands. Now, there is some question on whether or not the order, and I think the state is going back, not is the order going to go through? It will, but are they meaning civil conversions, taking up forensic beds, or all civil patients, including those that did not originate from a conversion? Thankfully, Eastern State Hospital has no individuals on a civil conversion in a forensic bed, but since the order covers all individuals who are civil, we are still at a kind of a point of what do we do? Eastern State Hospital does and has done a much better job at discharging. So we have 83 people currently out of that 132 on the discharge tracking list and looking for transfer to the community. Part of the order also indicated that Western needs to do a lot more. So we do expect Western will be sending patients to Eastern State Hospital to transition them off of the forensic beds. We're looking at 20 right now that they have told us over the next couple weeks. We don't know and are still working with Eastern State Hospital and DSHS as to where they will go. Historically, they've always been discharged back to their county of residence. But if you're homeless and you're currently residing here, oftentimes they've also determined that being your county of residence. So I'll defer to DSHS, and I think they're going to issue another declaration on here in the near future. But we are looking at potentially 132 patients that will need to be discharged to our community beds. And currently, we don't have many beds, as you well know, that will take that level of acuity. There are beds, not simply for that long term. And not only that, there's not that many housing services available that also have dedicated wraparound services to ensure that they maintain. And most of those individuals can't be in a setting where they can be independent. Their acuity and their psychiatric condition just doesn't allow for that. And so this has really been interesting as to, we're not quite sure, but we are working on it. So out of the 83, 12 of which are directly responsible by the Spokane ASO, because they are non-assigned to Medicaid and or the AIN individuals, American Indian, Alaska Native, who have Medicaid but have opted out of the system. So we are working on those 12 specifically, and then our managed care organizations are working on their remaining individuals to support their transitions. I wish I could give better news in terms of we have beds for everyone. Currently, we don't. I will tell you, Western is in a much more dire situation. So it may be a possibility they transfer more here. We have not been told that, but that is.
What is the capacity here?
For total beds in the community?
What, for Eastern State Hospital?
Including their forensic?
Like how many are we using up right now versus what, if there's 132 coming out? I mean, I guess it's like I'm trying to figure out how many beds are there total right now? And then.
Great question. So I know that the goal for the state was to transition all beds to forensic. So we're talking like what was designed for the civil versus not. Again, we have about 132 in civil beds, but how the state designates their forensic beds versus the civil beds, they're working on that process. I honestly don't have the exact number here. I think there was overall in the state 334 total forensic beds, but I don't know what the allocation is for Eastern.
Okay, and forensic beds, those are people that are sitting in jail that should be at Eastern.
They're the ones receiving competency restoration services as part of their 1077.
Because I think when we did this study, WASAC was doing a study, Juliana, to determine how many people were in the different facilities, that we didn't have that many. I think because Eastern can take them really quick, Mike, I think our numbers were less than 10.
Yeah.
Where Pierce County and King County were high. I wanna say less than 50, but I mean, I don't know, I don't wanna say, cause I'd have to look at the report again. But it was a pretty high number compared to what we have in our system. But that's because we're working with Eastern and have the ability, if suddenly everyone's coming from the west side over, then I could see where we end up getting backed up, I don't know. So, Commissioner Jordan.
I certainly am not an expert, but I just found on DSHS website, it says Eastern State Hospital has 367 total beds, 91 adult psychiatric, forensic services unit 175, and Gero psychiatric 101. So that's just what's on their website, if that helps.
And there's a certain amount of beds in the GPU, which are designated for those with developmental or intellectual disability. So there's, like I said, there's what beds are open. They said they're not closing any beds, but they're not receiving any new civil ad beds. The practical implications are not only that they're halting civil admits, but conversions that are still occurring within the jail will not be allowed out at Eastern. And so they're going to defer those. So we're going to see an increase in our DCR evaluation for ITA, and they may or may not meet the level of the state statute for the civil commits. And so we may see them in other community beds, as well as individuals being discharged from Eastern State Hospital. If they cannot get them out, or they don't have the bed availability, they're going to be utilizing DCRs to detain them. And that just transfers the responsibility into an existing inpatient bed within the community, which are limited, hospitals and EMTs. As you know, our SRSC facility takes very specific ones from law enforcement. So although EMT beds are available, really we're talking about FPHS, EMT, INBH, and Providence Sacred Heart. And they're already overflowing with other patients as well. So there will be an impact to the extent at which there'll be any significant concerns. I would see it's going to shift more towards having challenges with the jail and discharging for individuals who convert, and then community-based hospitals. But Eastern State Hospital wants it to be very clear when we were talking with them that they will not discharge anyone who's not ready, and their commitment is to the community for safety and well-being. So we'll be working with them to look at how that will impact moving forward.
It'll be interesting though on how many are, how do we know how many would be coming from the west side over? Because I know at like Inland Behavioral Health, they have the same situation there. A lot of the patients there are from the west side because there's no space over on the west side for that kind of care and treatment.
Yeah, we don't always, we're not able to track when they're sending them over here for in an inpatient hospital. We can track, because DSHS has made available as part of the order, that when they transfer from the state hospital to the state hospital. So that we do know those numbers based on what they reported, which you're right. But I also see us having to transfer our own residents out of region if we can't find placements because we don't have those beds available. So it's a possibility if they're detained and there is no bed available, they can be transferred to the west side as well because they have more hospitals that can meet that level of care. King County is less receptive to receiving our patients on the initial orders when they're not in a facility that meets certain standards. So oftentimes it's outside of King County. Their courts usually are a little more harder on our ITA detention paperwork on how that process goes through. So like I said, I do worry that be an outcome, more of our residents being sent out. Yes. Which I had a plan on that end, but Chris does, so I'll do.
Well, and I guess so then it's the funding, because like we just saw another contempt of, from the court of $100 million. So what happens with the funding?
So the $100 million that came out of the Judge Beckman's order, and of course there's additional fines that are levied if they don't leave the state hospital. If individuals, civil patients and forensics are staying in the forensic beds, they're for 21 days, I think it's $1,000 a day, and then $2,000 a day after that 21 days if they're still in that bed. So they're going to be racking up fines ongoing, along with the existing fines that are still at the jail for those sitting in waiting for that. But the $100 million will be thrown into that pool that the court already has, and they will determine the disbursement. History has indicated they don't really rely on DSHS to implement those funds. They look at other avenues. they're really laying heavily on their forensic navigators to work in this area, and so we've been meeting with them regularly. They don't have a lot of ability to direct anything. They mentioned AOT as the possible cure, but we also recognize AOT is a unique aspect that has not been widely utilized simply because it's LRA. It's an LRA, but LRA light.
So what's AOT?
Thank you. AOT is the assisted outpatient treatment, formerly known as assisted behavioral health outpatient treatment. It's another avenue for least restrictive alternatives for individuals that has greater access for the community. So community members can refer people into this LRA system. Where previously, it had to go through a DCR through detention or through a court. However, it's the same thing, and no providers come forward saying they want to do it. Really, the major issues there are the length of time they can stay on the order. So current LRAs have limits of 90 to 180 days. This one extends up to months, 8 months, that they can stay on this order and be revoked. But it doesn't really force the individual or the provider to actually participate. So we'd have the same issue where they can be revoked. So it's just an LRA, but with more steps.
You're building numbers, not solving the problem.
But with no beds, if you revoke somebody off of an LRA, there's nowhere to go.
Nowhere to go.
Problem has been solved, and no provider currently exists to do it.
You mentioned that we wouldn't necessarily be notified, or it could differ on when we're notified if somebody is sent here from Western. Would we be notified if the person had a history of being a sexually violent predator or something like that? Would that give us, would we have lead time? Would we be told earlier in the process? I mean,
So again, historically, they've said anyone who's transferred from Western to here will be discharged back to their region of residence.
Okay.
And so there is, we're hoping is that there'll be work for that to go back to, let's say if we get a Pierce County resident, go back to Pierce County. And so there wouldn't be any issue with them being discharged here. However, in the case that they do look to discharge here, our teams are notified in advance and we work with them weeks prior with their entire history, which includes any assaultive behavior and or sexual charges or potentialities for concerns in the community or placement. The reality is anyone with past sexual charges are almost impossible to place. There's not many places for them. So that's going to be one of the next hurdles we have to face as to what do we do then. But yes, we will be given, DCHS has done a very good job at least notifying us of those.
okay.
Is it, you know, in my mind, this is similar to what's happening up in Chewelah, where there is a hospital that they thought was gonna be a nursing assisted living center that suddenly has become a placement for people from Western Washington that have larger behavioral health issues.
So
Oh yeah, no, this is a big deal.
this is another area that we haven't really, that facility takes the step down placement, so individuals who need the long-term care in a more supportive environment. It's been an ongoing issue in Chewelah because when the state designated this long-term care facility for behavioral health, it was supposed to have wraparound services, psychiatrists, nurses, mental professionals. That hasn't come to fruition. But the state is eyeing those facilities for the placements of these individuals. So we may see an influx of Eastern State Hospital patients placed there. And that was a discussion I just had this morning with the reality that I don't think they know this. The state is eyeing those as max capacity, fill them up, which means more challenge to the local community because if they don't have wraparound services and it's not a locked facility, they can wander as they see without supports. Now, I don't want to be dire in this. The state is indicating there is placements and there is wraparound care. They're being very supportive in that engagement. But at this point, the frank reality on the ground is we don't know enough people. And the current experience by Chewelah is it's not going great.
Yeah, just talk to Wes McCard, Commissioner McCard up there. You know, or Representative Maycomber. I mean, it's been an issue and partly because of workforce.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, there isn't the workforce and especially up there or up in Colville. I mean, as we've seen just through the BHASO, issues of workforce in the outlying communities. We don't have enough in the urban communities, let alone the rural communities. So it's, you know, we're putting people at risk.
Yes.
You know, I think the patients as well as the citizens, you know, because it's not, you know, since it is not a locked facility, you know, there's a lot more law enforcement calls and all that that are happening up there, and so it's just,
But there's no incentive to keep those professionals in those rural communities and stuff. So the minute they get certified, they're looking for a paycheck because they gotta pay off student loans and everything else. So they're gonna come to the big cities and it leaves the rural areas just abandoned.
similar to what we're seeing with the schools program with the
Yeah.
therapists that, I mean, they can get trained up and go make over $100,000 versus, 60.
If they're lucky, yeah.
So, I mean, it's, at some point, there's gonna be that determination of how do you spend the funds and, what's gonna be the best.
Federal system works.
Well, and it's been evident that there's certain gaps in the system because the state's been relying more heavily on the ASOs on filling in the gaps with these patients, especially Medicaid that are non-assigned to an MCO. And the MCOs, who are the primary responsible party for the care and well-being of the physical and mental health services, are also challenged, and it's hard to get a directed effort. So we've been taking points on quite a bit of the discussions on our end at least, and it will impact crisis and law enforcement. So it's another kind of unique part of our system where we thought integrated care would solve all of this. What we're finding is there's significant gaps the state hasn't addressed.
And I think this just is part of why, in my understanding what the lanes are for the homeless authority, that we have the experts here, that are managing the funds, that, it's gotta be a coordinated effort. It's not a give it over to another group, so that's why, we just gotta really understand what those lanes are and who's really the experts and already doing it, and how do we coordinate. Any other questions for Justin?
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Justin.
Gina says that I'm up next.
Ashley,
so I
you are up
was
next.
going to
Yeah,
wait until you said that it was my
No.
turn.
You are up next.
I always appreciate when I get to hang out down here and hear about all of the work being done across other areas of the employer. Like I enjoyed that. So I'm glad that I was here for that briefing.
Awesome, thank you. Glad you were too.
Yeah, I'm here. You should have two things in your packets, two little write-ups. There are two contracts that I'm requesting that the board approve during the consent agenda next week. So I'm here to brief you on it. The first one that I'm gonna address is the FJCIP contract, which is the Family and Juvenile Court Improvement Program. Spokane has participated in this grant since the 08-09 session. And it really is, the grant funds fully fund a person. There have been times that the grant funds haven't covered all of the person, but we have filled in those gaps. What this employee does is tries to improve our courts that involve youth and families. One of the highlights of this grant and this program is it takes courts from across the state. Spokane is the farthest east, the nearest one is Chelan, so we really don't have anybody on the east side of the state except for us that is involved in these statewide discussions to see what other innovations other courts are doing, share ideas, develop best practices, and so this grant funds for this employee. And again, we have been doing it for the last 14 years, and I would love for the board to approve the grant next week as well. In the briefing, I provided a couple of successes. One of the ones that is near and dear to my heart, our FJCIP coordinator looks at data and makes sure that it's being put in by the clerks correctly. When there are new laws and we need to track how that law impacts our workload, make sure that the clerks are putting in the right code so we can run reports. And without that really deep dive into data, the reports that we can run, trash in, trash out. you really need to look and make sure that it's being done correctly, and then explain it to the clerks and help get them on board, which they've been fantastic. I truly wish that I had somebody in this position for each of the areas of law that Superior Court does, because we don't have time to do a deep dive in all of this without somebody dedicated. So unless the board has any questions about the FJCIP program, it will be on the consent agenda next week for your approval.
Commissioner comment that how much when I was working over in juvenile court, I appreciated that coordinator, and particularly the work they did to support parent for parent program. In case folks aren't familiar with that, it's really it's kind of like a peer support group that supports families kind of coming into that system and helps them kind of map out what do you need to do to be successful, getting to your treatment, navigating through the court system. And it really is a team effort with all of the stakeholders in the system supporting that. And I just heard over and over again how it really helped us get to good outcomes for families. So appreciate that. And you know, the reunification day and adoption day that the coordinator supports, I would encourage folks to attend if you haven't before. So.
I will note on the Parents for Parents, we did just receive word that program has been housed at Catholic Charities for the last 3 to 5 years. Catholic Charities is no longer going to support it. So they are looking for a new home. I don't feel, the court was the one that launched it, and we provided that support for the first few years. But then it really is better as a community-based program. So we transitioned them to Catholic Charities. And I'm not sure why they have decided to step away from it, but if you know any great community groups out there that want to support parents wanting to, become better parents so they can have their kiddos back, please let me know and we can make that connection. Because I don't want that resource to go away, because it's amazing. Parents, as they come in, are scared. I mean, it's very traumatic, and to be met at the door by a parent that has gotten through it and gotten their kids back is a much better person to bring them into the courts than a court employee that hasn't experienced that trauma. The next contract that I would ask that the board approve next week is Uniform Guardianship Act reimbursement program. So I don't know, in the last 2 years or so, I've come and approached the board with these reimbursements from the state. The administrative office of the courts has a new CFO, and he is doing a killer job getting these unfunded mandates funded. And so when the law changed in 2019 to really increased our requirement to appoint lawyers and court visitors in a variety of cases, which of course the county then has to pay them, the new CFO went in and said, great idea, state, but we need some money. And this is the 3rd year now that AOC has gotten these funds to reimburse county funds that have been spent in this requirement. So I each time it gets to the end of the state fiscal year, I'm a little worried, is this reimbursement going to continue? I've been assured that they believe that it is. And so I am very excited that finally at AOC, we seem to have somebody that is taking into account the costs that are passed down. And I hope that it continues on. I can't do anything to fix the costs that we've had to expend, these last tons of years. But it's really nice to see somebody at the state level really fighting for counties and courts to say, yeah, this new law is a great idea, but there's some money that comes along with it. So based on our caseload, they have allocated $335,000 for Spokane County in reimbursement for this next year. There are literally no strings attached except for we have to submit the reimbursement requests. Again, this is the 3rd year that we've received this reimbursement. We never have fallen short So the state has provided enough funding for us. So I would ask that the board approve that unless you have any questions. It's good news,
Yeah.
giving
A
money.
funded mandate.
A funded mandate, it's a shocker.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that concept is.
This is a historical moment.
It's very refreshing. And there's other things that he's done to get courts money. You have the FJCIP funding, they had some more state funds available as they were nearing, the spring. And so they reached out and said, let's get your coordinators new computers, printers, and all of that. So there seems to be this shift at AOC to actually help out local courts with the costs to run these programs. And so I'm excited that there should be more of this coming down the pike.
Mike?
Kathy, this is different than attorneys for the 3.2, or is this the same attorneys for that?
This is the minor and adult guardianships, which we just transitioned to Law and Justice to do the appointment. And while that GR would say that it would be best for Law and Justice to pay for the attorneys, I confirmed with the state that Law and Justice can't be reimbursed, so Superior Court's gonna continue to do that because obviously we don't wanna miss out on the reimbursement because of some red tape between our departments. So we will continue to pay for them so that we can get the reimbursement from the state.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if it was the same thing.
It's one of the many lawyer appointments that are landing in your lap.
Any other questions? Okay,
Thank you,
Ashley.
Thank you, you guys have a good rest of the day.
Okay, you too. That's gonna take us to Larry.
5 copies. I don't know if they got over here or not, so there's 2 letters for us. They're both from WAPA. One is dated July 11th. And the other is dated July 27th. So turning first to the July 11th, this is the Deputy Prosecutor Appellate Program. For particularly the 2 newest board members, they've only ever had 2, even though we have 3 divisions, obviously. But when I took office in 15, they decided, and it was in part based on some structural changes that we made, that they basically stole it from Division 2 and put it over here. I think geographically it makes a whole lot of sense considering how many counties are over here. They may be small, but if they run into a significant appellate issue, they don't have the staffing to work it. So here we are. Now there are some hoops that they need to jump through to get it. It's got to be an issue of statewide importance. And there's actually an internal committee at WAPA, the appellate committee, that's co-chaired by Greg Banks from Island County and McCray, and I'm not sure what county he's from. He's a newer elected. So I kind of help out by scouring the other electeds in our division and making sure that they understand the program is alive and well. We got a 3rd appellate attorney as a result of this, so we had 2. And then as a result of this award of the grant to Spokane County as part of Division 3, we've had it ever since. So this is just a renewal. And standard dates, July 1st, 2023 to June 30th of 2024. It's totaling $95,624.50. It doesn't pay for a senior attorney, obviously, but it gives a big chunk of it that the county's not paying. And they still get to work our cases as well, and it kind of ebbs and flows as to how busy they are depending on what appellate issues of statewide significance that meet the criteria as approved by the committee. But I don't think we're drowning or anything like that. So we're doing mostly our own cases, but this money helps assure that we're going to have somebody experienced over there. People with more experience tend to be able to do more work in a given hour or day or week than somebody who's brand new. We have 3 senior attorneys over there. They are exceptional lawyers. And I know that Chris would vouch for that as well, because he relies on a lot of what they do as well. So It's minimal work for us in terms of maintaining it. There's some billing requirements that we have to meet. The funds are released quarterly, and we have to submit our invoices that document the salary and benefits. And we haven't had a problem doing that. I haven't heard a complaint either from our side of it or the WAPA side of it either. So I'd be asking the board to sign off on that. It's very valuable to the county as well as our neighbors. The second award is, again, it's a continuation of the not traffic safety, but it's a position to prosecute rush charges on repeat DUI offenders. So we've been doing that for quite some time as well. There's actually 12 positions. They fund 11, and then the 12 position money kind of catches any overages and some stuff like that. It's actually outlined here in the letter. They're paying us $107,681 in salary and benefits for that. Again, in the new period of July 1st, 2023 to June 30th of 2024. Again, just reporting requirements and that sort of thing, making sure that we're doing the work that is required for the grant. We have to submit invoices as well. This saves another deputy position. So basically, between the two grants here, what we're saving is, if you average the two together, it's helping to pay for that senior attorney that's over there in appeals, and it's also helping pay for a much more junior attorney, but with benefits and all that, over in the district court. So the district court supervisor is very well aware of what the reporting requirements are. It's pretty straightforward, and we have, as you can imagine, board members, we have more than our fair share of repeat DUIs. I wish we didn't, but we do. Legislatively, there's also potential second try at lowering the DUI standard down to 0.05. I think WAPA has some concerns about that, but there'll be some more discussions as the upcoming legislative session approaches on that. But in any case, something we've been doing, again, both of these grants have been in effect for a while. They're very effective for what they're designed to do. The other thing I might point out on the appellate level, as you may or may not know, I did some time as an AUSA, and down there you write your own appeal. If you win, you get a little gift, and that is you're going to do your own appeal to the Ninth Circuit. So we have a program where we actually invite volunteers that express an interest to do some occasional writing, but those would be for only our county. Obviously, they wouldn't qualify for the grant money. But it really gets a deputy with less experience a real understanding of how important that record is in terms of the difficulty that you're going to have with any potential challenges, because if it's not in the record, as you know, it didn't happen, or at least it didn't happen correctly. That'll be the allegation. So anyway, I'd ask the board to approve both of those. Again, nothing really new on it. We're well versed with the requirements, not only for the work to be done, but also for the reporting requirements associated with each one of those grants of money.
Any questions for Larry?
I got a few of those on those gifts as well.
I can imagine.
So it's good to have the senior person available to help with the feast or famine of the appeal.
I'll tell you, Commissioner, it's been a huge benefit for us. And making the pool of experience that much deeper. And we have three really, really good ones. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thanks a lot. If you think anything, just let me know.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming over,
Yeah.
Larry.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Good to see you.
But they can basically bill against this to work on certain appeals.
To Kyle and Brady's here. So if you guys want to move up to the head
Sure.
of the table and
Is Jamie?
I think she's hiding over there. Hidden by the
We stole one of theirs and they stole her back at the AG's office, so there was some tug of war over deals.
You don't get out of it.
Where else in the country?
I don't know why, she just texted me and said, they notified us this morning they found a match, so. Now we'll see where we go from here.
That was open, yeah, but that's.
Okay, Kyle, I'll let you take it away.
Good morning, commissioners. We've got a few items to brief with you this morning. We're going to get started here. We have Jamie Hayes, one of our grant wizards, inform you about an award acceptance that we're excited to have coming through.
Well, good morning, everybody, commissioners. As he said, I'm Jamie Hayes. I'm the Senior Project Manager at the Public Works Department. And I'm here to tell you about a preservation award we just received for our roadway. I'm not sure that my slides are up, but I'm prepared to talk about it regardless. So in the spring of 2023, the Public Works Department applied for a grant through SRTC for roadway preservation projects. The Deer Park Milan Road was selected. We applied for a grant for $808,500. We were awarded the full amount. With a large majority of our grants, a match is required. Next slide, please. This is a federal grant called the Surface Transportation Block Grant that is allocated to our regional MPO, which is SRTC. There are various funds. You can see it's broken up into urban and rural. For example, our project is a rural project. The $808,000 that we were awarded is the lion's share of that rural allocation of $1.1 million. They had a total of 9.2 to distribute. This is a competitive grant process that we do through applications. Next slide, please. The preservation project is located on Deer Park Milan Road. The project limits span from US 2 to Bear Creek Bridge. The average daily traffic on this road is just a little over 3,900, and the pavement surface condition is 78. The road is showing signs of deterioration, rutting. The centerline rumble strip is starting to, fall apart, and the shoulders need some work. So this is why we applied. Next slide, please. This project is supported through the transportation goals and policies through the Spokane County Comprehensive Plan. I'll spare you reading the list of how this is supported, but just wanted to offer that to you for your review. Next slide, please. The black arrow is showing the subject site way up north in Spokane County, and then you can see there's a little cutout showing you a closer version of this. So it shows you Highway 2, shows that it stops at Bear Creek, and it's 1.14 miles total.
Is that the high school there?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that. Moving on. Awesome. Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to
It's-
get ahead of you.
No, I love it. It's
Got
a
excited
little
about
hard
the
to
high
see.
school.
You have better eyes than me. Next slide, please. Improvements include a 2-inch grind and inlay and replacement of the centerline rumble strips. And what this results in is a newly surfaced road that will last about 14 years approximately. The new rumble strips down the center line will help mitigate drivers crossing over, define the drive lanes. We have the 6-foot shoulders that support walking, biking, emergency pullover, etc. Next slide, please. This is just showing you basically what I just said. We have the 12-foot drive lanes, the 6-foot shoulders. And the results are that this is an improved roadway for people that commute or recreate in North Spokane County that have to use this road. This supports the city of Deer Park, the Deer Park Airport, Riverside High School, as Commissioner French pointed out, and the middle school, Fire District number 4. There's a fair amount of low-income housing off of Highway 2, and there's a rural activity center that has various local commercial services for that area as well. So this project supports all of those components. And preliminary engineering is scheduled for 2024, and construction is scheduled for 2025. And this is just a quick breakdown of the estimate showing about $1 million worth of construction and $72K in preliminary engineering. And with that, do you guys have any questions about this preservation project?
So, So I sit on the TIP board, and I know that we invest quite a bit of money in sidewalk programs for schools and stuff like that. Have we considered applying for TIP funds for this project? I know the profile doesn't include a sidewalk on the high school side of the project.
Well, it is a fairly rural environment,
Right.
and we do have some TIB projects that we're actually turning in this week. And so sidewalks are always on the list for improvements. The short story to that, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Jordan, I just want to say I got a chance to go with Mr. Schenk and kind of see the roads crews in action. So that was a lot of fun. I appreciated that. And I was just curious, how long does a project, what's the construction starts to do that 1-point-something miles? What's the typical time frame to get that done?
From beginning of construction to the end of construction, it could take weeks to months, just depends on what exactly they're doing. Brandy, do you want to speak on that a little
Yeah,
bit?
so the full project itself, for construction will take about a year, but the actual meat of the work, probably 2 months, so.
Any other questions?
Just a question for Commissioner Jordan. So did they teach you how to lean on the shovel, or did you actually use it? Or?
Yeah, I was on quality control team. Yeah.
So I guess, I mean, I know we're, the funds awarded kind of limit how far we can go, but I mean, having the stopping point, just, you know, right around Regal Lane does this sort of set us up for in the future, we're gonna look at doing the rest, kind of getting to 395, or is this sort of the worst section of the road, would you say?
I would say it's definitely the worst section of the road and probably the most used, just considering the land use around it.
Yeah.
We did initially look at the whole section, but we are fiscally constrained on how much money we can ask for. So sometimes things have to be broken up into phases to make it make sense. If the grant ask is too big, it's easy for them to say no.
Because it's, when we do a section like that, I can guarantee you I will get calls of, why'd you stop there? It's like, why didn't you continue? Is what we're gonna, I guarantee you I will get those calls and emails.
Maybe we can work with Deer Park at some point and meet them there at the city limits.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here.
Okay, so our Public Works Operations Building project, the county's first progressive design build project, is moving right along. And we have completed what is actually kind of the lengthy part of the front end here, which is after we've gotten our approval from the state, we've now gone through a pretty extensive procurement process. So Brandy Collier's here. She's our capital projects program manager. She's going to help walk her through, and we were both part of this. Actually, Matt was one of our scoring members as well, so we can talk a little bit to how that process came about and where we go from here.
Sure, thank you. And good morning. So yeah, we are here today to request that you approve our highest selected design build team. This is, as we've reached out in the past, our first opportunity at progressive design build project. So we're excited to do this. You can change slides for me. Yeah, so there's a number of opportunities that we get to capitalize on doing a project like this. Since the architect and designer and the contractor all get to work together from the beginning, you get to see some risk elements removed because the contractor gets to identify those early on versus waiting until construction when that could escalate cost or lengthen the schedule. It is a step back from how we typically award a low bid contract. And so it did take state approval when we went out and asked for the project back in February, March. We had to go to the state and get their approval to do the project using this method. Next slide, please. Yeah. Oh, I jumped ahead and so no, that's fine. We've got a number of different funding involved in secured for this project, which includes the $1 million in American Recovery Plan funds that you guys invested initially, that allows us to do some site cleanup and site mitigation. The project site does have some vermiculite on it. The site was used to create insulation, and it also has some known asbestos in the building, as well as there's a railroad that runs through it, which could have some leaching contaminants as well. So it's got a number of components.
Other than
So-
that, it's a good site.
Perfect. We own it, which is like key, right? So, and then there is some known, abilities. We can cap the site, and so there's some opportunities there. But we did reach out additionally to the Ecology Department for additional grant funding, and then we'll be looking at our 110 budget, as well as for match for probably Public Works grants for to finish this opportunity. The total project cost is looking to be about $20 million with this contract itself phased, but it essentially the construction probably around 15 to 16 million, depending on the scope of the work as we get into the project. So my slide changer left. But perfect.
So as long as you're on that, because I think the original cost estimate was about 12 million is what we were anticipating. So, yeah, so how are we funding the additional?
That was back in 18 or 19 or so roughly, yeah. And so when we came forward and we talked about the funding for this in the fall, we have a combination of, we have some left over from the previous shift. We have some sale disposition like the EVOC property track, and just the small arms range site. And then, so that makes up, roughly half with the ARP, and then we'd be going out for a loan for the balance. We're paying off our previous debt service from doing the shops this year. So we kind of have that expected loan payment coming through, and that's our expectation, unless some other opportunities arise, whether we become eligible for some public works trust fund funds, or if a shift happened in the future that could reduce that debt service. Those are all options available to us, but the expectation is that we pay it off over the next 10 to 15 years.
So the total that you said of 20 million, but then the construction cost maybe 15, 16, is the rest of that the cleanup and the?
It's more of the soft costs, so we've got our
the design.
the design
Okay,
and the
So it's like
our
taxes,
owner
our
services,
administration.
taxes outside of that as
Right, I
well.
see, okay.
Our own administration.
So what about
our owners
the-
rep and our legal services.
What about the, so is the 1 million in the ARP funds gonna cover the site cleanup mitigation?
Probably not. Okay. It's a huge chunk of it. It'll get us into a good spot. And certainly gonna take a lot of the, that's gonna keep the rest of the funds coming out of the road fund going towards the building.
Is it possible to get another map that zooms out so I can see how much of the site you're planning to use?
Sure, certainly.
It's kinda hard to see
I can tell you, and I can just kind of describe it a little bit, but I'll show you a follow-up here. Our expectation, we haven't started the design. That master plan shows that site basically on the east half of the property, kind of centered. I don't think that's where we're gonna land. I think most of the design iterations we've gone through, even though we don't even have our designer officially under contract, shows us pushing up mostly to the east to preserve as much of the site for future use as possible. So likely pushing up to, that is Cedar on the east border there.
North Cedar,
And likely building along Cedar, having the rest of the lower site, we'll still be using a lot of that for our heavy vehicle staging and laydown. One of the problems that we're constrained with is that just to the south is our heavy vehicle fleet facility that has parking for like 2 trucks, even though we manage and work on all of our heavy vehicles there. So they all sit on this site as they're coming through. All our plows and sander boxes and such are here as well. So it is, the property itself ends up as a huge laydown space for our heavy vehicle fleet. That's something we're working to address in our kind of long range plan.
So yeah, what about the south building and that comes up right against the isn't it bordered right south of it is the Regional Stabilization Center?
That's kitty corner. That's actually though on that campus where the regional
Right.
stabilization center is. We have all the crews, not all, but most of the crews that are going into this new building are on that block.
Right.
So we can completely get off
Okay.
of that block.
Okay, all right.
Which is hopefully, again, another funding source for us into the future. Maybe we can sell that to another purpose, whatever, because then there would be a full city
Okay.
block campus available. Because the Crisis Stabilization Center is on that southeast side of it, and we have the entire rest of it for
So-
construction management and the sign and
So
signal
the
shop.
plan is to move all that other 3/4 of that to this new facility. Okay, I
Yeah.
just need to get caught up.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So that's a future opportunity site for the county or to sell to a private housing, anything.
We are happy, we want to get completely off of that site. That is part of the project goals.
Thanks. All right, back to the selection process. So back in February and March, we received approval on the project charter from you guys, as well as approval from the state to move forward with this project using the alternative delivery method. So then we immediately put out a request for qualifications for teams. And then we received 4 of those back. And then we had a scoring team of 5 members, and that included public works staff as well as our facility staff. But those team members were assisted by our owner's representative, which we hired to help with this project, Hill International, as well as our local purchasing and legal teams. So then we reviewed those proposals and our qualifications, and then we selected the 3 teams listed below on that table as the teams to move forward to provide a proposal for the project. That proposal process had 3 steps, which included site walks, a solutions interactive meeting, and the proposal itself. For the site walks, we invited the teams individually to come and visit the site itself for construction, as well as meet with team leaders and ask questions about how the operations currently perform, what possible solutions they might have, and just an opportunity to take pictures and kind of get ideas. And then they met with us for an interactive meeting. The teams were in charge of developing their own agenda, meeting with us, providing a presentation, and kind of just walking us through how they might attack the project, essentially, how they would set up their permitting, their risk, define their schedule. Each team is very qualified, but they all go about the process a different way, and then they have different milestones. So it was nice to see that visually and have an opportunity to interact with the team and see how we interact with the team as well as how they interact with each other. So you have the architect and the contractor in the same room, and you get an opportunity to visualize that and experience it. And so those meetings, the site walks weren't scored, but the solutions meetings were scored, but not as heavily weighted as the proposal itself. So then the teams at that point had about a month to come back and provide the paper proposal form for us. And at that point, the original scoring committee met back up, each scored it individually, and then met and reviewed the scores, at which point we're here, where the team determined that while all the teams are qualified and received very high scores, that Garco Integris was the lead performer and that we'd like you to award the contract to them at this point. So that's what the resolution recommends, and we appreciate it. And I do want to take a minute just to thank you guys from our field teams, because Krista, our project manager, has provided them with monthly updates on this process and the progress and the project itself. And they felt a little displaced for the last few years since the stabilization center moved in. And so they really appreciate seeing a movement forward, just that this is actually happening. So thank you guys. Any questions?
That's one more question. So with the cleanup and going out for an ecology grant, would you try to do an assessment of the entire site? Okay.
So there's
Because-
2 grant opportunities through ecology. We already had to get into one because the deadline was yesterday, I think. And that is the planning grant for the entire, that's the planning grant for the entire campus. So I think we applied for 300,000 because because there's multiple parcels, we got to count it as a multiple site grant opportunity. So we've applied for that, and that's 100% no match, which is my favorite. And then behind that is, if you remember back in the day when we did the CSO tank across from Pride, there was what was called a voluntary cleanup program and the IRAG grant.
We found like a abandoned garbage dump.
Yep.
Yeah.
Burned garbage dumped in the lake.
Yeah, that was
Dynamite.
fun.
And so that's another grant that the planning grant would help us to qualify to apply for. And that's a 50% match, but we could actually use the ARP as that match.
Okay.
So it's potentially another 300, you gotta spend 6 to get 3 of it back in essence. So we would potentially, I'm pretty optimistic that we could get 500 to 600 out of ecology, get the full planning done for the and that includes a lot of the
Full site that goes all the way to Maple or Ash, wherever.
yeah, and it's a little bit of like a Tetris piece because we go all the way to the north boundary on the west side and all the way to the south boundary on the east side, but there's kind of 2 little notches out of it on both corners there. So that would be all the planning, the testing, the contaminant characterization, all the sampling. So that would be great to cut that out. And then, so that's that planning grant component where they would be able to assess the entirety of the site. And then we could apply for that voluntary cleanup program, which would just offset another 300,000 of our cleanup costs.
So in the future, even if you didn't clean up the whole site, you would know what was there and what you would maybe need to do for the rest of that site.
Yeah, and with the mix of contaminants out there, it's kind of different strategies. So the vermiculite is one of the best things about it, if you can say that, is that it's non-water soluble.
Right, it just kind of sits there.
So you don't have to have an impervious cap.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it could be gravel. And then you don't have to have a monitoring program where like if you did an asphalt, you have to go monitor it and do reporting, show that you're fixing the cracks, making sure no water's getting through there. You don't have to do that with vermiculite. You will have to either do that or remove any contaminants from the railroad. Yeah. So that's kind of 2 different solutions depending on the extent of what we find out there.
I don't know whether that product is still used or not, but I remember several years ago, Burlington Northern contracted with a chemist, and I think he's out of University of Washington, that actually had a aerobic enzyme that could consume the oil left by railroad tracks. And so they were using it on their abandoned railroad lines to try and clean up environmentally. I don't know whether that product is one still there and still accepted by EPA as a way to clean up that contaminated oil, but you might want to just do a little Google search and find out whether whether they're still using that product on abandoned railroad lines.
Weren't they considering that up in the north-south corridor in those areas? I don't know if they ended up choosing that, but it was discussion.
No, they rerouted the line.
But that was a discussion at first.
That was part of the
Could they use
discussion.
that? Yeah.
I actually worked with the company that worked with Burlington Northern to do that and stuff, but that's been a couple decades ago, and I don't know whether they're still doing it or not, and whether EPA has still signed off on it or not, but it might be worth a Google search. Might help in terms of some of the cleanup. Instead of having to remove it, you just dump the aerobic on it and let the little monsters eat up the oil. Pac-Man.
What's our feeling on receiving the grant? The first one, I can't remember.
They asked us to apply.
Okay,
Therefore,
that's a
I
good
feel
sign.
confident.
Good, I like the sound of that.
And when would you know? You said you turned it in yesterday.
I wanna say it's November, but I feel like they're all stacking up now, so that might be mixing up my
That's
dates.
what I recall. And one final comment, if there are no more questions, it's just that I sent an email, I just had asked that we could consider approving this resolution tonight instead of our normal 2-week process, since we were off for the last few weeks and we completed it. Sadly, right after the last meeting. If you're still amenable, we'd love to get this moving so we can get them under contract, understand if you're that doesn't make me
Is it
comfortable.
already on the 2 o'clock for tomorrow?
It's on
For today?
I had one last question I forgot to ask. Is progressive design build different than design build, or is that just a new name?
It is different,
And give me
slightly.
an example of
The difference is-
city, did we do the progressive design? No,
We
okay.
did design build, and the difference is all in this early stage in the procurement process. In design build, once you shortlist and you get your qualified firms, you end up having what the industry calls as a beauty pageant, where the
Right.
teams come in and they present their 5% designs, which they end up totally overspending on, and because the more they spend, the more likely they are to get the job. And it's really fallen out of favor, because everybody that didn't
You
get
were
the
telling me-
job
yeah, you were telling
loses
me
a
about
lot.
this
And then
before,
as an
right.
owner, you pay these big honorariums, like, you give them $100,000 or a big project. I mean, I've seen $1 million honorariums for losing firms on like big airport, LAX jobs. And still they're like, that's not enough, we spent 2. So it's totally fallen out of favor into progressive design build, which is we're picking you based on your qualifications. And then progressive design build introduces a validation phase. So that'll be the first phase of this contract, where they vet our program, our scope, and our budget, and make sure that what we have asked them to do, they can go do their soil investigation, they can get some test results back, and they can do a lot of work with us to make sure that the program is viable.
Remind me, when you say you're asking us to approve, is there a total dollar amount on the contract?
So there's a guaranteed maximum price on the contract of
What is that?
$16.7 million.
Okay, all right.
What did you say?
16.7.
16.7. On the construction. 16.75. Construction and design.
Correct. I think it's inclusive of design, but not sales tax.
And then just for clarity, you had, how many firms applied? Or you had 3 finalists, and then 1 recommended to go with? Okay.
We got the four of the largest local contractors with 3 local architects and 1 out-of-town architect. That team was actually the team that was not asked to move forward. And then the 3 big pairings that we see very frequently around here for design build came in, and they did great. We would be very happy with any one of them. Just when you're looking for the little things and who worked well and who we felt most comfortable with throughout some of the process, that Garco and Taggers team rose to the top.
Very good, we'll see that on the 2 o'clock. You have one more?
Yes, Matt's got a couple of riveting ones for you here. So, if you don't mind, Matt will hit us with we have an establishment and an interlocal? No, a road name change and an interlocal.
All right, first, I'm just really pleased that Jamie and Brandy were able to come today. They are both phenomenal. We are extremely fortunate to have both of them. I cannot begin to overemphasize that enough. Jamie goes and gets the money with Barry Green. They're kind of a team and they complement each other incredibly well. And then Brandy helps a lot with that effort too on the capital project, scoping the project and getting the numbers to them. And then she delivers with her team. So we're just extremely lucky to have them. Very, very happy about that. So I want to start with that, and then just a couple of quick items here. The first one is a grant that's being applied for through SRTC. I'm sure a couple of you at least are aware of it. It's a planning grant through Safe Streets and Roads for All, and there's a match requirement. It's a $500,000 planning grant that we're applying for, and the city of Spokane, the Valley, and us are kicking in $15,000 apiece. That's our portion of the match. SRTC is putting in $55,000, and that's really the entire thing. Then SRTC will take the lead on that, and there'll be a planning function that'll go on for, I believe, a year or a little longer, and that will lead us into the implementation portion, where we'll be applying for actual projects as a region to get those funded through the same program. So kind of a 2-step process, and we have a little bit of match in it, but not much, $15,000 in the scheme of things for that large of a planning grant. So pretty good deal for us. happy to answer any questions you might have on it.
What's Safe Streets for All?
It's the latest FIT program and I'm not super familiar with it. I wish I had Jamie back, but it's their latest safe routes type program. Do you know more about it, Brandy?
It's just encapsulates the multimodal elements,
Bike and
pedestrian bikes, and so they just continue to expand on the terminology to incorporate all functions of transport, essentially.
Sometimes the naming is changed to make more appeal to the legislature that funds these programs. So whatever makes them happy,
Sounds really good.
we'll call it
Streets
that.
are all. It does sound good. I agree.
So, I mean, it would be like, sidewalk improvements, curb ramps, bike lanes that are separated, or things that make it easier for all people of all abilities, children getting to school, all those types of things. Is that kind of the big picture?
I believe so. I'm really not that familiar with the grant program.
So everything kind of comes out of that big pot for multimodal, but maybe not transit. Transit
Doesn't
would be-
include transit,
Yeah,
no,
okay.
but does include sidewalks.
Which is nice for us. We tend to get one or two of these each year, and they help us fill in gaps in the pedestrian and bicycle network and fix ramps. ADA ramps is a common use. So it's a good product. This grant also is a nice complement to a lot of other projects we have going on, because a lot of times we're doing projects that this helps out with the parts that we wouldn't normally be able to fund. Should be good. More to come. I'm sure you'll be seeing it at SRTC as they develop the program. Any other questions? Okay. The next one's a road name change. And do we have another slide, Ron?
Yes.
Tiny. No, I'll talk to you about this one. What this is if you're familiar with,
No, that's the next one I have.
that's it.
That's it.
There it is. Just past it.
Flash.
There it is.
Don't look at it. So this is Evergreen Elementary up off Country Homes Boulevard. And we had a request from the school district, actually. They had a teacher there, Mr. Elmore, that I believe taught there for 40 some odd years. And he was very well liked. He's loved actually at the school. And they would like to rename the stub road from Eddy Avenue to Elmore Avenue in his honor. And it was a nice gesture. The principal and the school district are fully supportive of it, and we have no issue with it at all. Obviously, it's a small stub street. It doesn't affect road naming or the alignment with anything else. So felt like a nice gesture, and happy to answer any questions about it.
When would we be doing this?
Oh, yeah, I think we might have to advertise this
I
one.
think this is a public hearing, so it's probably the 22nd or so.
Yeah, it'd be a couple weeks, and then the notice to advertise, the advertisement, and then we'll be back.
Oh, you're right, it might be.
Yeah, it'd be a few weeks at least.
Having numerous family members who went to Evergreen, I can confirm that Mr. Elmore was indeed well loved. So that's my contribution.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
He's a really good family friend of my parents. Cousins.
Okay. There's Randy.
I heard about it retired.
Okay, Randy, we've got you on Zoom today.
Yes, you do. Good morning, commissioners. This will be a real
Not
brief
hear
one.
you, and it doesn't look like you're muted.
Let's try
Yeah, why
this
don't you
again.
just
It's,
say
Can you hear
something,
me now?
see if that was.
I
Nothing?
think it's our, someone changed the settings in here.
Okay, just a second, we gotta change the settings in here.
Build in a big runner.
Randy?
Yeah? Is that better?
Gotcha.
There we go.
All right. Good morning. What I'm bringing for you, this will be on next week's agenda. This is the official resolution to create Fund 198 for the Law Library. I don't know if I know we talked about this previously, so are there any questions on that?
Yeah, we've talked about it previously and it just needs to happen.
Okay, so that'll be on next week's agenda for you.
Very good, okay. Thank you. Then that's gonna take us to Jeff McMorris. I know. Jeff, are you coming in? Dun, dun, dun.
You're up there.
I'm up there?
Yeah.
I am, I'm in two places at once. I'm multitasking. So a couple weeks ago, prior to the summer recess, the board had a discussion around possibly getting a federal lobbyist to help on all things federal, whether it's policy and or additional grant funding. So I have gone through multiple RFPs from other jurisdictions, looking mostly cities and counties throughout Washington state for their ideas, easier to edit than create, and put together a proposal, not really a proposal, it's really a first draft for feedback. Just going through, I talked with both Tony Hall and Victor in purchasing and Heather Arnold in grants, since of course they do a lot of contracts and grant procurement. And so you have two options. You can put out an RFP, and if that is the option you choose, we would drop this into the broader legal RFP that purchasing has as the scope of work. You can also do what we call the piggybacking off of another county or city who's done an RFP themselves and hire somebody who's gone through that process. I thought we could have that discussion at the end after kind of talk through everything else. So this has been through, you see the different colors, different people have made their edits along the way. So first, for contract term, everybody kind of thought it'd make sense to start with a shorter contract with renewal options, just to make sure it's a good fit when that happens. So are people kind of good with this approach of a 1 year with renewals? And I see in head nods. We need to come up with an amount. I threw in the 66,000 that you see there, and that's just throwing out what our state contract currently gets paid. It's an annual fee paid equally in monthly or maybe quarterly installments. Procurement also say, doesn't have to be an annual fee. You can go with an hourly rate or some sort of contingency percentage. So at some point we're going to need to have that discussion because that's an amount that's needed to be posted. Under the scope of work, you'll see it's kind of twofold. Some is on actually procuring funds. And then the other aspect is on the relationship building that goes along with the political world of procuring funds. So those are kind of those 12 points. The top of the second page, kind of how frequent you guys want feedback. I pulled, you'll see in red, the bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual. I just pulled all different thought processes from different RFPs. So it kind of needs some feedback on which way you want to go, or you can just do the general statement like number 1. Selection factors, procurement on the last page. Procurement felt that if we did an RFP, that we should go with the best value approach or the value add method, which would have RFPs scored blindly, just based on the content of what's submitted. The scoring under this method, I got to sit through a brief training with Victor Lieber in procurement. If they do a great job, they get a 5. If they're exceptional, it's a 10. If it's less than adequate, it's a 1. And those are the only scores you're able to give. They get added up and averaged. The procurement office would run it. They train the applicants how to respond. as well as the scoring team who's scoring. That's another point we need to talk about is an RFP who would be on the scoring team. And the best value also focuses more on experience, performance, and qualifications, less on price. Price is a factor, of course, but they're making the case with professional services, cheapest isn't always the best. So
Just a second,
that's the
Commissioner French has a comment.
percentages laid out below. Yes, sir.
So so the airport has been using Tim Peckinpah with K&L Gates as its federal lobbyist, and he's now retired. And we are literally just in the process of starting an RFP process to hire a new federal lobbyist and stuff. And so we've been through this process a couple times already. So you might want to reach out to either Larry Crowder or Todd Woodard and see, you know, the forms, the process, the advertising and everything we've done for the airport, and see if there's anything that would help enlighten what we want to do here without having to reinvent the wheel, kind of a deal. So just an observation. I guess I must have been out of town when you had the first conversation, otherwise I would have offered that up earlier.
So that's great feedback. I'll email Todd.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is too, do we want to go through this process, or and there's some firms out there that I think people know, do we want to piggyback off of another contract that another entity has? Because we can do that as well and not go through the full process.
How long are you at the start of the process with the
Yeah.
airport? Okay.
Yeah, we will probably have it done by September, October, because we want to get into that next round. And we want to provide some transition because Peckinpah's contract, I think, ends the end of this year. And so we want to have at least a 60 to 90 day overlap with him. I mean, having somebody in DC has been incredibly helpful. And I know a number of you know Tim and stuff, and he's now retired and in Issaquah. So having to replace him is next step. So, but anyway, but there are a lot of good firms out there and stuff, and so we're doing search and the interview and the whole 9 yards.
One thing, we're going to need to have some level of the scope of work and selection factors regardless of process, because if it's an RFP, of course, it's posted in the RFP. If we do the piggyback, we're still going to have to put our expectation into a contract. So getting feedback, whether you want to do group feedback today or just, you know, submit stuff and I can compile it for a conversation another day, we will need some of this no matter which direction you choose to go.
Amber, did you have another comment?
Well, the scoring, like, I mean, this is down the road if we decide whatever scoring we should do. In my experience, the interviews were actually really reflective because you can put a lot on paper that looks really good. And I, several times at the city with our federal and state lobbyists, people that had a higher score initially after the interview
changed.
Yeah, more than 10%. So anyway, just a feedback.
These numbers were thrown out by procurement as a starting place. So we'll go up on interview and maybe.
But that's just a quick feed. The 3 years experience might be, I mean, I'm not opposed to it, but like maybe 2 years. I don't know if they have a lot of these other experiences and they have success for increasing grant awards or working with other, I don't know if the 3 years was just something you saw consistent.
Procurement, where it says consultant selection factors, that originally set minimum qualifications, and procurement caught that.
Oh,
and
and you have the word
changed it.
preferred, sorry, I didn't see that. Okay.
So this is what we're looking for, but if if you're mostly there in some stuff, it's not a minimum where you
Got
have to have it
it,
all.
thank you. No, I didn't see the word preferred there, so I like that word better, because you might have 2.5 years, but
You
you
excel in
worked,
everything else, you might
you
still
worked
like
for a congressperson for 10 years, right? I mean, there's other advantages to other, yeah, okay.
And it's the firm as well, right? It doesn't.
Yes, for the most part, we always have individual slash
yeah,
firm, because if it's through an RFP process, most of the RFP responses that I looked at, they'll let you know who would be your main person, and then who would be the other expertise that they would call upon for different things, so it is that combination.
Why would we hire a federal lobbyist that didn't live in Washington DC or the Washington DC area? I mean, it just seems counterintuitive to me. I mean, if we were gonna hire a lobbyist that lived in the state of Washington, why wouldn't we just continue with Burgess? I'm assuming there's a reason, but I just don't know. I mean, the nice thing about Peckinpah and Caneloquet stuff, they got offices right there.
Everywhere.
And, yeah, everywhere and stuff, and Perkins Coie and a bunch of other federal lobbyists are right there in DC with representation. Things happen so quickly that if you're not there, I don't know.
There's definitely an added value to be located
Absolutely.
in the nation's capital.
In the nation's capital, yeah.
So
I mean, I think,
I mean, there's a reason why we hire Burgess, because he lives in Olympia during
Right,
session.
right.
Yeah.
We don't hire somebody that's based out of Spokane that has to hop on a plane and fly over to Olympia.
yeah, some firms
all
might
the
have
time.
people in both places, so I think definitely a consideration. I don't know if we'd wanna just eliminate applicants, but,
So then let me ask the other question then. If you're willing to hire a federal lobbyist out of the state of Washington, why would you exclude the other 49 states? If the location doesn't matter, then are you going for talent? And if you're going for talent, talent could be in Oregon, talent could be in Idaho, or anywhere. It could be in well, no, there's no talent in California. Maybe in Texas or somewhere else. I mean, so, yeah, I'm just trying to connect the dots.
it could easily be changed to being that it's under preferred. That we prefer some physical DC area. So like I'm seeing several head nods on maybe removing the Washington State.
What about prefer Washington State or DC? But then it leaves it open to others as well. I would think if they reside locally, I don't know, I think it should just be open, but they might have more relationships with stakeholders locally who might then be able to be leveraged in advocacy nationally. Whereas if you're hiring a firm who's got clients all over the country, they may have less attentiveness to the local dynamic and relationships. I mean, that's an argument that would play in favor of local folks potentially. But I'm fine with it as it is personally. Again, it's just a preferred as it's written, so I don't think it excludes people from elsewhere.
Yeah, just if you're gonna be in the game, it seems like you ought to be in the stadium. And so otherwise, I mean, there's things, I mean, that's what we've experienced with Peckinpah and the firm is that, they hear stuff on the ground and the hallways and everything like that. And if you're not there, I mean, it's just like, us in Olympia. I mean, one of the things that is a benefit for us for Burgess is he's on the Capitol grounds almost daily. He hears things in the halls. He knows what's going on and stuff. And if you're not there, you're absent all that information and stuff. I mean,
The Beltway is known for gossip, yes.
the Beltway is notorious for gossip, and you learn more in the hallway than you do in the hearing.
And I think some firms though have people local as well as in DC,
I
so
think that would be ideal to have that,
that balance.
somebody who understands this area and at the presence in DC to know what's needed. I do see the word must needs to be taken out of 1 through 5. That was there from the minimum qualification.
That's where I got tripped up there.
Yeah, so-
Must, oh wait, prefer.
Just circled all those.
So in terms of the, Madam Chair, could I ask about, follow up on the question about scope? Because you're trying to get at like, that's kind of
I think that's
where
the
we
meat
gotta,
of it.
we gotta
Yes.
figure out, because that would then determine probably the cost, you know, the amount of time we'd expect this firm or individual to put towards our efforts.
So that's,
So, because it seems like there's a lot on the list. Because you were culling from all these other examples.
I started with 4 pages, so I did
Yeah.
pull a lot. 4 pages of just scope.
So I guess for me, we've been talking about coordination of grants and how do we get more grant funding in general to the Spokane, county area around economic development, around, infrastructure, other key priorities. So there's also this broader, how do we get more investment in the county that might not come directly through the county government, right? It might be a biosciences investment, right, that's in the county. But you're seeing this person is really focused on Spokane County government priorities, or would they be able to also coordinate around some of those regional economic development priorities as well? Because I think that, like, do we want them to go to also be able, you say third parties, working with third parties, I'm thinking, GSI, I'm thinking healthcare organizations that we work with in Spokane, bioscience organizations, just to name a few, aerospace, all our clusters that we work in. So how far would we want this person to go around coordination of funding, or is it just funding for Spokane County's objectives only, So that's just my question to the other board members, because that, and there's, like, you put in executive branch federal agencies, so when there's, grant opportunities in all sorts of agencies.
There's a lot more than just the earmark process.
Right.
There's a lot of money that goes through agencies. When I was
And
at
that trickles
HUD,
down to what
I would
Justin
get
does
lobbied
and-
for how
yeah.
the RFP would go out. So to me, a really good firm actually plays upstream, and they work with the federal agencies to get the RFP put out in a way that we are more likely to score well. Or like the one we looked at recently that Cantwell's office brought forward. And then, when Kyle and team looked at it closely, we weren't even qualified. And on a first blush, we thought we were, but a team that will work upstream that makes sure we were qualified. So it's more than just, to me, it's the earmark process, those direct allocations or congressionally directed spending. It's working with the agencies, both that the RFPs come out well and that we are applying well and bringing the groups together. You could go deeper. Some of the federal money goes to the state, a lot of it to commerce. Do we want this person, or is that where Burgess does the handoff? Burgess has been more focused in the legislative session,
Right.
but is there somebody that's following the trickle down of
Federal
money?
yeah.
Sometimes it goes through the state, sometimes it stays at the federal agency, and the application's direct to the agency. So there's a lot of different decision factors for you guys to consider, and of course that would play into the amount. You think just a federal process, usually in spring, I believe, they're settling the top dollar of how big the budget's going to be. But then fall is usually where they actually start doing the sausage making of what goes to each agency and how it's distributed. But I know at HUD, it was first quarter, because usually the budget's actually passed fourth quarter. They rarely make their September deadline. So at HUD, it was first quarter, the agency was deciding how the RFPs would go out. Second quarter, they were on the street, awarded third quarter. So you do have a lot of year-round, if we're gonna be following all of these pieces, but then that comes back to how much of a person do you want, what's the budget?
Well, and that's the value of a piggyback potentially, because if they're also working on other priorities in Spokane County, then there's an ability to kind of leverage that to some degree, you know. But anyway, Commissioner French,
Well, and you know, you raise a good point in that, you know, what if this is a lobbyist that's going after funding, that's one. If it's a lobbyist that's going after legislative input,
Policy side, that's a different animal. And I think it's to try and get one person to do, or one firm to do both of those might be either a big firm. But with regard to the types, I mean, the things that, in my mind, that federal lobbyists would be helpful with are the Federal Highways Administration. Transit already has a lobbyist. The airport has a lobbyist. GSI has a lobbyist. But there's nobody advocating for county-specific projects. So things that are county-specific is what I would think that we'd be looking at. Otherwise, if you're looking at a whole hodgepodge, the 66,000 ain't going to cover it. I mean, you're looking for a couple $100,000 for a lobbyist to do all things to all people. So I want to try and narrow it down so we can afford it and be effective too. So I mean, federal highways, I mean, maybe EPA, maybe I don't know. What are some of the other agencies you'd want to try and interact with?
probably Health and Human Services with the work we do with behavioral health.
Is that
Although
the
most of
federal
that
level
comes
or the
through-
state
Well,
level?
mostly it's federal that sets the policy and the money. It
Yeah.
doesn't come through the state.
Broadband's one of those issues
Yeah,
right now. There's a lot of federal rule writing is happening right now.
Yeah.
That's EDA, right? The
I'm not even sure. I think that's for the
Economic
infrastructure.
Development Agency, I think it's coming through.
So I mean, so that would be one that we'd want
Yeah.
to take a look
Be
at.
very targeted, yeah, sure.
But I agree with you. I think it should be, like, if there's this, because there's this other conversation that Commissioner Cooney and I had with GSI about like a coordinator around how do we get more funding in general, you know, across Spokane County for different purposes, even if it's not just coming to the county, right? But that's kind of a different animal.
Right,
This would be just county, this one would be very focused on our county priorities for funding that would flow through the county.
I think if they're good, they'd be working with GSI
Right.
and the airport and all these other,
Yes.
I mean, because even.
And that's why I was saying,
I'll
if it was the
forward
same,
things
if
to
it was the
nonprofits.
same
This is good for
lobbyist.
you.
Thought you might be interested.
Exactly.
If it was the same person too, then that is helpful, like as another entity sometimes, because they can be wearing two hats in the same meeting.
So you guys are, at this point, you're thinking both policy and fiscal, it sounds like. Are there,
I think so, because now with those big bills, the infrastructure bill getting kind of now put into action, we'll want to follow that money and make sure we're eligible.
a lot of the money has not been RFP'd out
Right.
from the agencies yet.
I would think
That's
funding
why
would
the
be a
fiscal
top priority.
I agree with you. I would think, what I would think would be the biggest benefit was something that would be a little stronger, lean in more on the funding side than the policy side. I mean, we have elected members that we can reach out to on the policy side. I think for the funding side, I think that's where I would personally like this person to be a little focused more. And I think, you know, I would like them, I mean, as we've stated, I think it's more important that they focus on the county's issues. I mean, yes, if they happen to be working on the same issue as GSI's lobbyists, they can sort of tag team that. If, you know, I think any other organization here, but, you know, I don't know if it's good for us to be funding a lobbyist that ends up being sort of every other organization's lobbyist too. I mean, so I think they need to know they work for the county, they work for the county's interest to benefit the community as a whole on funding that they can help secure for Spokane County. Not necessarily can every nonprofit in the organization thinking, oh, well, we can just go to the county's lobbyist and they can go do the work for us. I don't want that to end up being what this position turns into.
I don't think anyone has anyone's intent.
Okay.
But I think maybe we could articulate, like, working closely with other lobbyists, like you're saying.
I think that's partly our role, though, as commissioners that are on those other committees and boards, is to show those priorities as we develop. We need to develop ours first. And then, you know, talk to GSI about it, you know, talk to the airport about it. You know, what we don't want is competing. I mean, there's gonna be some that is gonna be competing interests, because we're gonna have, you know, we're all gonna be going after congressional spending, and we're gonna be competing against each other. You know, so some of that's just gonna happen. But I think it's more, I think the lobbyists all talk anyway, but it's really on the commissioners to be informing those other organizations what our priorities are. And us coming back knowing what their priorities are as we develop that.
But I think Commissioner Kenny's dead on in terms of, you know, there are gonna be situations where competing, and I'll give you a great example. The airport was, you know, actively lobbying for Spotted Road to realign from the airport, but it wasn't as high a priority for SRTC for the rest of the county as it was top priority for the airport. And so we are competing for transportation money. Ultimately, we got the money. But if we had not been advocating for ourselves, we would have never got the money. We would have gone somewhere else and stuff. So that's a good example of, you know, having, you know, the different groups are gonna serve their own special interest, and that's what they're supposed to do.
And the city and the valley the same way with their
Yeah.
railroad crossing.
Pines Road crossing and stuff,
Bridging the
yeah,
valley.
bridging the valley.
You know,
Same thing.
And a lot of that is, there's specific dollars for grade separation projects versus other projects, you know, but, you know.
That's an example of upstream, somebody lobbied hard to get that individual pot
Yes.
for grade separation, so they don't have to compete against other transportation projects.
That's what Cantwell did.
And that was,
She was the lead on that.
and the House and Senate are different, like the House limits their members to 15 requests per year with a dollar amount cap at about 5 million, maybe 6. The Senate does not have any limits, and then those rules generally change depending on who's chair. So we had new sets of rules this year when Senator Murray became appropriate chair, and then when the House changed party majorities. So we had different rules for the earmarks that went in this year than we did 12 months ago, because the rules shifted.
Which is why I honestly think having both policy and funding is fairly important.
The policy informs funding at some level.
Yes, exactly. Well, and just like you were saying that, you know, the Public Works Department thought that they could apply for a grant, but then they weren't eligible, so that's where it affects policy, so.
Because personally, I don't want somebody who just sends a list of all the grant opportunities. We're on those listservs already.
We're already on those lists.
We don't need.
We need somebody who has the time to dig deeper and make sure what they're sending, at least 90 percentile that it's gonna work, and then working upstream to make sure we're in that percentile that's gonna work for. So do I keep pushing today for some decision points, or is this as far as we're gonna go today and come back?
Let's think about it a little bit more.
You guys kind of feel free to shoot me. I'll send it around electronically, so you guys can just make edits and thoughts. I'll make the changes that we've discussed. I'll
And then you'll
connect
talk to
with
the airport as well.
the airport. I know I have talked, because speaking of helping each other, we've exchanged letters of support, Todd and I, for different projects for the county and the airport, so I have his email. And we'll bring this back up for the day.
Thank you.
Well, and I do appreciate, I think this is a good list of, but we just probably wanna make sure it's like reasonable what this person can
The
accomplish.
things that are missing, is it too much?
But I like the idea of this individual too helping us with you develop the federal funding and the policy agenda, and you know, what is the agenda? Cause they're gonna need to know. So that'll be good for, I think, this board to put together our agenda, so this person could help, or firm could help us do that.
Yeah.
So that we can be more effective.
And know what funding is coming our way, because that might
Yes.
inform what you want to focus on.
Right, we might say, oh, we wanna focus on broadband, but maybe that's not till the next fiscal year or something, so we can readjust.
So I'll give this around to all of you and your staff, and we'll revisit it.
One last comment. So I give you a good example of why, I think somebody in DC is valuable. When I was going after the build grant for Geiger Road out in the West Plains, we had developed a package that responded to the RFP. But what we did not know until I actually made a visit back to DC and sat down with the deputy administrator that was going to be reviewing the grants, was that what wasn't in the RFP, but was part of their not criteria, but emphasis, was how many jobs were going to be created by the investment into the road. And fortunately for us, we could throw the Amazon building and a bunch of other projects to it. So our cost per job was our cost per job was very, very low. And had we not been in DC and had that conversation, we would have never known that. We would have never gotten a grant, because we responded.
Knowing what to include.
Knowing what to include is critical, because what they need to know is not necessarily always in the RFP. And so that's the value of having somebody there that has those conversations in the hallway to say, oh, and so you're looking for job creation in the grant, you're not just looking to put asphalt down. That's a real life example of how that's important. Anyway.
I get it. I think having a presence in DC would be a huge benefit.
So, Vice Chair.
Oh, I'm gonna,
Okay, yeah.
are we done with this?
I think we're done.
All right, we agreed to this, okay.
Head nods for being
I wasn't gonna move along before you guys. It's like last word, period. You turn it, it's like, are you sure we're done? I wasn't gonna cut anybody out. All right, well, if that's it with Jeff, then we'll move on to Doug Chase. Gonna talk about Holmberg Park pickleball court conversions. We've talked about this for a while.
Yes, we
We've
have.
talked about it so long, these aren't even in my district anymore. So it's been that long.
Well,
And the picture on the left, they were teenagers.
wow, perfect introduction.
Take it away, Doug.
Take it away. Sure. Okay. And this is a very timely update. We have put these out to bid, the projects, and fortunately, we did receive a single bid that was good. Unfortunately, it just came in a little bit higher than our budget. And so I wanted to connect. We are on track to have some of the work done by mid-October. And my recommendation before you, or just the update, is we had a $425,000 budget to try to do the renovation of both the Linwood courts and the Holmberg courts. Next slide, Ron.
This is just a quick refresher of what we're looking at. At Linwood, we were looking to renovate the 2 existing tennis courts and have new tennis courts with the nice acrylic finish on them, like you see on some of the nicer facilities that are used for competitive play at high schools and so forth. Next slide is Holmberg, and at Holmberg, we're looking to renovate the existing courts here to provide 8 pickleball courts. And this was a result of a mini planning process that we conducted back in 2019 when the folks were much younger. Next slide, please. And there's, again, just another photo of some of the existing conditions there at Holmberg. Next slide. And again, going back in time, our planning process, we had, I want to say, just over 207 survey participants, which was excellent. 87% of those were all about pickleball courts. 96% were 100% in support of this project to do the dual renovation. So we still have a lot of tennis players that are out there and excited for the improvements as well. And in fact, I think back in 2019, we had done some research. Pickleball was the fastest growing sport at 3.3 million participants. That's probably doubled since then, maybe tripled. And I think at that time, they figured there are 18 million folks that play tennis. So here is the summary of the options that were selected and what we put out for bid. So in a perfect world, the bids would have come within our budget and we'd be in a position to do both these, both courts. Next slide, please. And so what I am recommending, we've been able to go back and speak with the contractor and look at options. And I'm recommending that we utilize the funds that we do have to move forward with the pickleball court renovation. We will request funds in next year's budget as far as the ability to come back and do the tennis courts at a later time. We've talked with the architect as far as, there's various options. We could reject the bids, we could go back out to bid. And visiting with our landscape architect, he does not feel that if we were to do that we would come in any less or any more affordable. The contractor that has bid this is very well qualified, does a very good job. The other minor adjustments that we're looking at, we've been able to interact with the contractor. The project is designed to maximize getting the most done for cost. He designed it where we would basically cut chunks of the bad asphalt out and patch it. For a few dollars more, they'll actually go in and grind out all of the asphalt, remove it, replace it with a full new sheet of asphalt, which then when you throw the coating on top of that, it should last much longer than the cut and patch approach. And so with that in mind, again, there's a few dollars reflected in here with what's proposed. We would go back, we would accept, we would award the bid, then through a change order process, we would adjust it to just do the pickleball courts and do them with a better construction approach. So that would provide us adequate funding to move forward with that. And we are excited to be in a position to do that. Should you be supportive? I believe it's on the 2 o'clock to award the bid, but we can of course pull that if that's not a direction you'd like us to go. And the time frame for completion is mid-October, and so we're kind of fast tracking at this point. We want to get this done. As you pointed out, we've been at it for a few years and we're really excited to at least be able to get this part over the finish line for you and the community, and really excited. This will have that acrylic surface, which we don't have in our other pickleball courts. The community is just really, really excited for the project.
Used to be.
Used to be, it's
I
weird.
just want to ask, what took Commissioner Kern so long to move this forward when he represented the district?
How many times do I email you about Holmberg Park?
Yep, we've had several. We almost had funding at one point.
So So the long term, so essentially Holmberg will be our pickleball court, Linwood will be the tennis
Remain
park.
tennis, and
So,
we
once
would
everything's
hope to renovate it in the future.
Okay.
We'll continue to request funds in future budget cycles and have that on the list for next year, but we'll again keep at it.
But at one point, wasn't one of the concepts of having the pickleball courts where the old pool that's no longer in use, wasn't it, to
Yes, in
demolish the pool and put the
Yeah.
pickleball courts there?
That concept is still there. So
Okay.
the bigger concept through our park master planning, we have that, I think, in 2025. Going from memory now, I was looking at just the other day, where that is the long-term goal. We have that in our 6-year CIP to be able to do just that, to demo the old pool and add additional pickleball courts there. And that desire was through this process as well as the overall master plan update. So we are optimistic and hopeful to be able to do that in the next few years ahead.
Okay.
Happy to answer any questions.
I think everybody's good.
Okay. Great.
Very exciting.
Yeah, we're very excited about it. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's gonna then, look at us, we're ahead of schedule. Take us to our miscellaneous. I've already talked about the council of governments. So Commissioner French.
So, Senator Cantwell has been championing a national program to create regional technology and innovation hubs throughout the country. Ultimately, what is the desire is to create 20 of these hubs throughout the country. And each hub would have its own unique area of interest and or expertise and or research and stuff. And so there's a process to whittle down, it's a competitive process to identify who will be the 20 hubs. And so a couple weeks ago, John Hemingston from GU, the COG out at GU building, and GU, John Sklup, made a presentation to S3R3 about taking the Triumph building, which currently sits empty and that he owns, and turning that into a regional aerospace technology center. And so they are moving forward with submitting the first response, which is a registration of those that are interested in supporting this effort, which basically says, hey, we're in the game, we want to be considered, but as we go through the next couple steps, it becomes, much more defined in terms of, the shaping of the project and the contributions and commitments and everything like that. So what you have in your package is just a general letter of support for this interest from Spokane County. That would say, yes, we would be supportive of developing this regional technology and innovation hub out at the Triumph facility. The Gonzaga, Eastern, several of the manufacturers, Boeing, SEL, a lot of the technology companies in this Kootenai County, Spokane County have already signed on to be supportive of the effort. And so my inquiry to the board and S3R3 at the airport, and I understand, but I don't know firsthand, so I don't want to represent it, Kootenai County, Coeur d'Alene, and I'm told the city of Spokane is also going to sign on. I don't know specifically about the city of Spokane, but I know about the others. And so Airway Heights, Medical Lake, all of those have also signed on. So the question is, does Spokane County want to sign on as one of the partners in this regional effort? There is a area at the bottom of the letter on the second page. It says, insert the organization's contributions to the center. And in my mind, it can be at this stage very broad in terms of what that contribution might look like. I mean, from SDRC's standpoint, we have the ability to invest financially, invest resources from a human resources standpoint to be able to push that forward. From the county standpoint, I don't know that this is the kind of thing that the county would really want to get involved in a full kind of blown fashion. I mean, we would support it maybe financially, maybe. I don't know what other kind of resources we might bring to the table other than political. And, you know, maybe that's the extent of it, is the potential for some kind of financial contribution, potential, not hard numbers. And that could range anywhere from $1,000 to whatever the board decided to want to do, but also legislative support, lobbying kind of deal. So that's kind of the nature at this stage. Much more to come as the plan becomes developed, but at this stage, that's the extent of what we know.
So I have a couple questions. So, I mean, I think, yeah, it'd be too early for us to say that we would look to financial contributions because that's kind of what S3R3 is supposed to be doing, is those incremental increases are going to them to do stuff out there.
No argument at all. No argument at all.
Great things out there.
I was, like I say, I was grasping,
But I mean, I'd be more than happy to, like, you know, that, I mean, if this is, you know, it seems like a good thing and it's kind of being out there, to, you know, support, and, you know, to me, it'd be better to show these other entities that have already supported that we are adding our support to.
Yes, and I did have a list with all the other entities, and I can get that, wait a minute, maybe this is it. That includes Boeing and Gonzaga and all these other entities, but I can get that for you, we do have that.
I just think that looks better that we're
Yeah.
adding our
Yes.
support to all these other groups, so.
Right.
So if it hasn't come up in another letter, it just puts that out there, just,
Yeah.
as you know, they kind of look and they're supporting, okay,
Yep.
great.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, so they've already signed on. In fact, when John and John made the were you at the presentation? No, I don't think you were. When John and John made the presentation, they listed out Boeing and SEL and all of those, as well as Gonzaga. And obviously with Henningson's relationship with Gonzaga, I mean, he's one of the big drivers of this effort, as well as Gonzaga University and the engineering department. But I can get that list for you, sure.
So do we need to put this forward today, or would we just be able to put it on next week's agenda?
I think there's a timeliness to it and stuff, so if we could get it today, that would be great. And maybe what we do is approve the drafting and signing of a letter and then add that stuff into it before we finally sign it.
Okay, do we want to do that miscellaneous this afternoon, or just now?
Now would be great. But we
So-
could do it this afternoon, whatever would be the pleasure of the chair.
Well, I'm just, because I got to open up for public comment and all of that, so it's like, do I do it at 2 o'clock when more people are potentially? I don't think anyone.
I yield to the wisdom of the chair, whatever you'd like to do.
But, and I would say that just a couple things, like district in front of Josh's name would need to be deleted in the header. And then Coeur d'Alene and Kootenai are not spelled correctly.
Yeah, I noticed that. So this draft letter,
I
was.
thought that got fixed, that was on, so this is like an old header that that I think Gina fixed at one time, so.
Yeah, so I did not draft the letter. It was drafted by Gonzaga. So why Gonzaga doesn't know how Coeur d'Alene is spelled, I don't know. But they were the one that provided the draft letter for us.
I mean, I'm happy to sign on.
Nobody knows how to spell it.
I know. So, yes, if we want to just
Yeah, we can
authorize the
just do it
drafting
now.
and signing the letter.
We can do it now.
All right, I move to approve the drafting and signing of a letter to be signed by a majority of the board and other than an open public meeting to the Honorable Alejandra Castilla, the Assistant Secretary of Economic Development, stating our support for the Regional Technology and Innovation Hubs.
Second. You can have it.
No, I yield to you.
I have a motion and a second for the drafting of this letter as discussed. Are there any other comments before I open up for public comment? Okay, so with that then, since we are going to take an action, I will open it up for public comment. So anyone that would like to speak to the motion, first call. Online, just hit your raise hand or star 9. Star 9. I'm not seeing anyone in the room. We're not seeing anyone online. Second call for anyone wishing to testify. Third and final call. See no one. I will then close the public comment and to my fellow commissioners, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. So then you'll just get us a draft.
Yes.
Filling in and then.
And with all the others that have signed on to.
And what is the time frame? Because I want to put a time frame to it that you want responses back. Like, I guess when you send it out.
Yeah, I'll give you a timetable on it
Okay.
and stuff. My understanding is by the end of the week, but I'll confirm that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you set the time frame, but
Okay.
if you don't hear back from people, then they're good with it.
Good, okay. All right. Next item?
Yes.
So I'm gonna jump. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, I'd like to do item D next, because it's getting close to lunch and I know people are getting hungry. The annual Red Turf Breakfast at Eastern Washington University is coming up on August 16th. And that is a breakfast where they actually serve breakfast on the football field, starting at about 7:30 in the morning, then go into about 8:15, and there's a presentation, then everybody gets off the turf before it gets hot. So I am going to be there because I do this kind of stuff in my district, but the question is, does anybody else want to be there as well, or would the board be interested in sponsoring a table? And the table is $850 for 8 people. And so the question is, would the board want to be part of this or not? I know that we got a couple Eastern graduates and stuff, and so that's why I didn't want to hog all the time.
Oh, that's a table sponsorship. I'm sorry. I was like,
Yes.
wait a minute. I'm like, $35 a ticket or 8 people for $850.
It's sponsoring a table.
Okay.
Yes, sponsoring a table.
So we're sponsoring the event too.
Yes,
So
yes, yeah.
there'll be
You
recognition
get,
for us.
you sponsor a table and the event, yeah.
Um,
Or you can just attend and for $35 you can get a nice breakfast.
I'm not available that morning, so I will not be
Okay.
attending.
What was the morning?
The 16th of August.
Like,
It's a Wednesday.
I mean, we kind of do the tables for the state of the city and the state of the city of the valley. You know, I'm not sure that I want to get into doing tables for different.
There's a lot of universities.
Yes.
I was asked to make the ask, and I made the ask, and so now I'm done asking. Okay.
I will be out of town, but sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, well, and they actually have a conference they're playing football in too and stuff, so I mean, no, I'm sorry, I just had to go there.
I was gonna say the U has a conference
They
they're gonna play
do,
football
too,
in
yeah.
too.
Be a little more than 800 a table, I think. These days.
So the next request is coming from Mark Losh, who is the executive director for the West Plains Chamber. And his request is, with all of the things that they're doing, and they are doing a ton of stuff, it's hard to keep track and keep up with everything they're doing, would the county consider increasing its contribution to the chamber? Because it's become much more broader. Membership is almost doubled in the last year. They're engaged in a number of civic activities as well as other organizations and stuff. And so he asked if I would be willing to make the request to the board, and I said I would carry the request forward and then see what the pleasure of the board would be. So if you'd like, I can get you a whole list of all the activities that they're doing. I do have that. And that does not have to be a decision made today. But if you'd like, I can get you a whole list of all the things they're doing and then have you consider it. We can discuss it next week or the week after next.
So I guess how much are we paying now? And how much is he wanting?
Like, what's the next membership level?
Cause I mean,
Or
cause it's
is that
kind of
how they're
like
structured?
compared to the Valley Chamber as to what, what they do
Yeah, so I
versus
think the
what West
Valley
Plains
Chamber,
does.
we're giving like 12.5 to, and we're giving the West Plains the same that we're giving Deer Park.
It's either
and-
2,000 or 2,500.
I think it's 2,000 is what we're giving them, yeah.
Is there a membership level he wants us to come in, and do they have that type of structure? To where like you're a sponsor, supporter, gold member, visionary type, like, are they structured that way?
That's a great question. Let me get you an answer. I don't know. So let me get you more information and then I'll come back next week with more information on it.
Yeah, so one of the questions I'd have too is how many members do they have versus, like how many members
Sure.
of the Valley Chamber? And like for the price that we're doing for the Valley Chamber, then we're part of that gets us, so we are a sponsor in each of the events.
Activities,
Yes.
absolutely, yeah. Well, and it's the same thing we've got with GSI too and stuff. We're Grand Poobah, whatever it is, kind of a deal. So I will get you that information. I will bring back next week. Okay. Yes, sir.
We typically make a decision like that in the budget process and later in the year. Is that the time frame you're envisioning?
You can do it anytime you want. Typically, we do as part of the annual budget process. And we certainly could do that here too. Yeah,
I guess that's my thought, is that
Yeah.
would be what we can contribute
Yeah.
to the following
for
year.
the following year, yeah. Like I said, I was asked to start the conversation. I'm starting the conversation. Now I'm done with the conversation. Thank you very much. All right, thanks.
Scott?
Mine's a quick one. I was actually thinking this was on the agenda this afternoon, but it's not until the following week. But you will see a grant coming through from the Washington Public Defender's Office for Blake funds. That's for the resentencing. This has been one that has come through in recent years as well for multiple of our teams in the criminal justice system. I believe it's a $200,000 grant, so it is a recurring one. It does reimburse the county for dollars that resources that we spend on the Blake resentencing. So pretty straightforward, but just wanted you to be aware.
And that's just specifically for the public defenders.
Only for the public defenders.
Versus the LFOs.
We get, yeah, I believe we get some for some of the courts, for the prosecutor, and those are the ones that come to mind.
Okay.
Plus the clerk gets some to process the LFOs. That's all I have.
That's all you had. Do we have an executive session?
We have a number of them.
Just a second.
I'm sorry, I just had one miscellaneous item question. I noticed today we're considering the contract for the GCC and Avista Stadium selection, right? I think it's on today's agenda.
No, that was done a couple weeks ago. You may have seen one for LTAC, Lodging and Transportation
Okay.
Advisory
Okay.
Committee funds from the Valley
Is it
for Vista Stadium.
Oh, okay.
Is that being
Struck
delayed?
that.
Yep, they, the city council is voting on that tonight to award it to the county.
Got it,
So we're gonna
okay.
hold off on accepting those till next week.
We talked about that yesterday.
Right, no, and I'm sorry if we passed this a couple weeks back, but when we were presented who I thought was gonna get the award, when the person we hired to run that process for us, he had mentioned Leidig, but then I think did we approve a contract for Garco?
No, Garco is for the public works.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's why I was confused.
Okay,
I was like, okay, well, good. We got 2 contractors, 2 awards. Good to know. Okay,
Spreading the wealth.
okay, good, thank you.
And the Garco one is on today's agenda.
That's why I was getting
On Q.
confused.
Yes.
Sorry, I
Yes.
think I saw a Vista Stadium somewhere in there and then I just,
You did,
Yeah.
yep. Okay. And that Garco is specific to the Public Works Building.
Thank you.
We have 3 exec session items, and it is, this morning was pretty packed, so I thought maybe we'd just take them this afternoon after the,
I
briefing
don't
session.
do people have, I got.
Musical interlude.
that means it's time to go.
Executive session.
Barbara Jones.
50 minutes total.
Do we wanna take some now?
What is it?
We don't have a noon meeting.
Same ringtone.
We have 3 exec sessions at a total of about 50 minutes.
5-0.
5-0.
I mean, I'm okay taking one if there's already people here, but I don't know how long each one is.
20, 20, and 10.
I just have to, this afternoon, I'm gonna leave by 3:30.
And let's see here, do we have any,
Got just a Janet who's flying in and
we have 1 public hearing this afternoon just for our budget amendments. Everything else is, there's a
Consent.
couple notices, a couple board appointments, and then consent, so it'd be a 15-minute meeting.
could be.
We could
Why I
have
said
people come in and
If we could
testify.
do one, we could, you know.
We could do the.
Public testimony
There's probably some
expected.
open
We can do,
forum,
I've got one that we can do very
10 minutes.
quickly. I'm gonna let the other attorneys know that those will be this afternoon.
Oh, and you do have the 1 by leave for this afternoon as well.
That's correct.
Yep.
I know we discussed it yesterday, that is simply to direct the prosecutor's office to seek dismissal of the county from the procedural lawsuit that was brought challenging the city's ballot initiative that was a citizens initiative. So,
And you'll discuss that.
yeah, I can put something on the record this afternoon.
Yeah, as we do the by leave, just so
Sure,
you'll be on the record with that.
absolutely.
Okay.
No problem.
So now we'll do a new
Yes, so
executive session.
I'm prepared on 1 pending potential litigation executive session pursuant to 4230-110-1I. I think at this point, I'm gonna say this will involve the board, Scott Simmons, myself, and Jeff McMorris. There do have others who are potentially involved, though I think we can probably just cover this. And if more is needed, we can bring this back again at a future date.
And how long?
I think we can do 10 minutes,
10 minutes? And any action?
no action.
So we are going to go into executive session for 10 minutes for the item just discussed by Chris Anderson with the people that Chris just stated. So it is now 12:05. It'll take us just a few minutes, so again, probably 12:20 we'll be out for sure. And then we will be, no other matters are coming before us at this point in time, so we will adjourn and then see everybody back for our 2 o'clock legislative session